100 days on a barren, frozen comet. What would you do if you only had 100 days left? Would you destroy the world around you, trying to make a monument to yourself? Or would you sacrifice yourself for a chance to make the world a better place when you're gone? In the middle of one of my most difficult struggles for survival, with freezing temperatures, no life or food, and zero drinkable water, can I complete my plans to make one of the best builds I've ever done? Can I survive the brutal broken world to begin with? The more I try to change this world to protect myself, the more the world will start to be filled with pollution and poison. As I fight for survival, the world around me will change, melting, and it will even start to break down itself. Yet, in all of this, is there still hope for that cozy home that I'm dreaming of? Before we can get to that amazing build, we start off in a pretty rough spot. I'm completely blind and just barely able to crawl forward. The dust starts to clear. I start to realize I'm actually inside of a crater. And I think this is where my rocket crashed. Above me is a bunch of smoke and sulfur from the wreckage. I walk out of the crater, see that the landscape is frozen solid, covered in snow, with nothing but gravel. No vegetation of any kind, or any food. Just giant stone peaks jutting out of the surface of this world. Speaking of no vegetation, this dead world has little juts of grass, but they're basically just fossilized. They're not giving me any seeds, no matter how much I try, and trust me, I kept on trying. And unfortunately, that's pretty bad too, because now I see that I'm going to need food and I'm going to need to find water to drink. And it looks like I'm going to have to watch over my stamina. I even see that my hotbar looks like it might be turning blue. And all of this while I look around and see that this world is pretty hostile. No trees, no vegetation, animals, nothing. Can't even see any dirt. Not exactly a holiday. A little bit of good news though. I find some ice, which means we might be able to get some water. A little bit of bad news too though, because once I break the ice, the water immediately starts to flow down this giant cliff into this deep, deep ravine. I'm realizing it's a completely dried up ocean. If you couldn't tell, we also have realistic water physics. And that's why when I broke this ice, it didn't just turn into a water source. It immediately started to run down to the very bottom of this pit where I can't get it. Realistic water physics will be a huge problem later on, but I can't really worry about that right now. I'm searching for anything that's going to help us survive. I'm checking through all these ravines to see if there's anything down here. I do think I see something that might just be our ticket to survival. The good news is, this world is filled with a ton of gravel, so we don't need a pick or a shovel to dig any of it up. I can pick it all up by hand and make a staircase to get down to the bottom of the ravine, and there it is. A cave root. Although this planet is frozen solid, that tiny little bit of petrified remains might just be our salvation. Because you can eat cave root, and it's not exactly a buffet. But it's all we have right now, and we really need this. The good news is, there's a lot of cave root down here. The bad news is, it is not a renewable resource. We're not going to be able to survive 100 days just on a few measly little shriveled up roots. Yes, I know, I've been trying to lose a little bit of weight, but this is kind of ridiculous. However, I do have one idea, and luckily, this one actually pays off. I can turn the cave roots into sticks. It's not much, but it's the little bit of hope I needed. And I get a little bit more too, when I find I can use flint to make some basic flint tools. And while that is definitely some good news, it's making me feel a whole lot better, of course. You know my luck, I'm immediately hit with some bad news too. I start to mine up some coal, because it's pretty dark down here. I'm trying to make myself a torch to see around when I see this, a cloud of carbon dioxide raising up to the top of this cave. If you couldn't already tell from all the sulfur and carbon from back at the crash site, this world, with its very thin atmosphere, is very susceptible to pollution. We're going to have to be very careful about our carbon footprint on this very delicate planet. I start to pick away this cave root right here. But I think I may have already picked this. Something weird is happening here. I have to focus on other things first. For example, find out that I can turn my sticks into planks. Even though this costs a lot of cave root, which means I'm gonna go a little hungry here, I can now make my very first crafting table. Once I set this thing down, this cave is officially my home, even on this brutal, hostile world. I craft up our first stone pick, and at least this comet still does have some iron. As we cook it up in our first furnace, once again, I see another cloud of carbon dioxide start to rise out of this. If this stuff starts to gather up in a big cloud inside of this cave, it could explode, or it could just poison me, so I'm gonna have to be really careful with this stuff. For now though, I'm too desperate to be careful. I have to continue mining even more iron and get a little bit of osmium too. This will be extremely useful. While it's tempting to use our first iron to get a pick, I have to prioritize my survival first, and instead, I make a bucket, because I'm gonna need it to carry some of my water. I now gather up as many cave roots as I can, and I'm pretty sure this cave has been completely picked dry at this point, which means we might not have any more food or wood. And while that definitely might be a problem later down the road, I'm more worried about the problem that's immediately in front of us. A cloud of carbon dioxide has started to melt the ice right above me, and an avalanche falls on our head as gravel dumps in and almost buries me alive. I look up to see a giant hole where the snow used to be. Now this means we even have to be careful about this world falling down onto our heads around us. And even though all of these terrible things and the pollution are really starting to concern me, I get the best news I've seen so far. Because it turns out that if you leave the cave roots alone, they'll slowly start to creep down the sides of the walls. This means we might actually be able to get some more food and maybe even a little more wood too. Now that I know we can make a little more wood, I decide to make our very first chest. I know you guys hate an ugly inventory, and to be honest, so do I. So even though this is using up a lot of our precious wood, I think it's going to be worth it. Next up, instead of an iron pick, I make an osmium pick, which is an upgrade, trust me, and I use some of our iron to make shears. Now, I can go through the rest of this ravine and grab all of the cave roots that I haven't already picked, but I use shears on them instead. Now I can move these and plant them back on the wall closer to my furnaces, and for the first time ever, I'm making a brand new type of farm of cave root, which will now start to grow down the sides of this wall. I'll be able to harvest them now to get a very primitive way of food. It'll be very slow, but very necessary. I'll even be able to get a little wood too. I do kind of like that this comet has forced us into something pretty cool. I've never made a cave root farm before. I've never been forced to do it. I never would have thought of this before, but honestly, it's pretty smart. Unfortunately, this means there's even more bad news coming our way, because I'm seeing I've got tiredness. I stayed up for an entire night without getting any sleep, and I'm quickly starting to suffer from some pretty brutal debuffs. And debuffs aren't even the most of my problems. Too much tiredness might even lead to our death. I have to find a way to get some string to make a bed on a planet that has no sheep. Now the good news is, I have a few options that I can go after here. I could grow some plants, which could give me string, like flax or hemp. Yes, I know we already have enough smoke on this planet, but I'm desperate here, guys. Give me a break. The only problem is, to get either of these, we need seeds and dirt, and again, we're on a planet that's just gravel and ice. Good news is, I see that there's a recipe to make grass. Perfect. Now it does require a little bit of water, so that's the next thing we're going to go for. Something called phytogrow. It takes niter, which luckily I've managed to find, but it also takes an ore called apatite, I guess, which I've never heard of before. For now though, can't worry about that. I farm up my cave root, and at the very end of day 2, I head out, because I need to get some water. In the dark of the night, as I go across this creepy, dead, silent planet, the cold is really starting to get to me, as my hotbar is quickly turning and more blue. But luckily, I do get up to this dried ocean and find a couple pieces of ice. I surround them in cobblestone so they don't immediately run down the cliff, and finally, I have a couple buckets of water. This is kind of a big deal. Unfortunately, I am still thirsty right now. I take a break to get a sip of some more water, and I find out with realistic water physics, every time I drink water, I destroy that water source, which means we're going to be using up our very, very limited resource. And I'm still thirsty too. Back at home, the cave root farm is looking pretty nice, so at least we have that going for us, right? And we get a little more good news too. Just a few blocks away from here, I do find that apatite that we've been looking for. We just add a little bit of sand. Pretty quickly, we're able to make this phytogrow. Now, with some dirt that we actually did manage to find on this planet, a bucket of water, and said phytogrow, we can get our very first block of grass. Not exactly cheap, obviously. It does use up some of our water, which we do need really, really badly. But for now, we don't have a choice, as I start to set up all this dirt and grass right above the furnaces. As rough as this planet is, I gotta say, it is kind of a blessing that it did give us a little bit of dirt. By mixing our dirt with gravel, we can make coarse dirt, which will make the dirt go a little bit further. All we have to do is hoe the dirt up and turn all this coarse dirt into regular dirt. And if you're wondering, why am I setting this dirt right inside this cave above these furnaces? No, it's not just to be compact and save space. See, the carbon that is being produced from the furnaces, although dangerous and poisonous, might also be exactly what saves our lives, as it can fertilize our grass and make some breakable weeds grow above it. Or, well, at least it better. I'm now tiredness 4. I'm starting to feel some pretty crippling debuffs, and I'm afraid that soon I might exhaust myself to death. Now, I don't have any more ores to cook up, but I need as much carbon dioxide as I can get. Yeah, as bad as that sounds. So now, I'm just cooking up regular stone in these 3 furnaces, and I guess just waiting, slowly getting more and more concerned. Unfortunately, the furnaces are also producing sulfur, which has no positive benefits. It's just all toxic, and it could easily ignite an explosion right in my home. So, right above the grass, I have to make a tube that goes all the way up to the surface and try to vent out any sulfur that pops up. But the sulfur won't kill us if the freezing cold does first. Digging through all these thick blankets of snow and covering myself from head to toe in ice is quickly getting me freezing, and I'm starting to already take damage. By the time I get down to the bottom of my ravine, it's warm enough down here so that at least I stop taking damage. But I'm still freezing cold, so I can't go digging in the snow, not just yet. And while I'm almost dying from exhaustion and freezing, I do get a little more grass, and the sulfur all gets vented out. I am living on a knife's edge here. This is the most dangerous part of the 100 days. Tiredness 5, and yet another cloud of sulfur. I quickly have to push this out when I accidentally put down this torch. Then I discover this. I'm so weak because of the tiredness, I can no longer break torches by hand. This also includes harvesting the cave root, which means I can't get any food. This is really bad. I need to get some sleep right away. But I'm so tired, I can't even go mining or looking for anything else. I put all my eggs into this basket. Finally, we do see that our crazy plan works. Of course, I can't even do this easily. I can't even break the grass by hand. I'm so tired, I have to craft up an axe and come back up here. Now hopefully, we will get some hemp or flax. There, we got one. Industrial hemp seed, thank God. Question is it going to be enough? I'm so tired, I can barely even walk down here. I drag myself over to the core of the cave, where I start to set down a little bit of dirt, and I begin our very first pathetic little farm. You guys know me, I love farming, and normally this would be a joyous occasion. But since I'm barely able to stand, sadly, no time for celebration today. And it is just in time. My stamina is now in the red, which means I'm only minutes away from dying. But we get one last piece of good news, as the phytogrow also acts as bone meal. If it didn't, we would have died right here, right now, no question about it. But luckily, Thermal Series saves our butts, and now we have just enough hemp to craft up just enough string. We have to hurry here and be really careful, but it's looking like we might actually have a chance to make it with this hemp. I craft up enough string to make the wool, and I craft up enough wood. And finally, we have our bed. I put it down in the cave. Although this place is dirty, freezing, full of pollution, I don't care. I have never been happier to put my head down on a pillow ever before. And as I wake up the next day, with my tiredness completely gone, I am feeling so amazing. Now, I'm still super close to dying, but dealing with that stamina problem means that now I actually have enough energy to try to solve all of the other crises that we're about to run into. For example, I now have enough strength to actually farm all of this cave root. Also, now I can finally punch the grass out by hand and get even more seeds. Now, hopefully we get something a little more appetizing than all this disgusting cave jerky. From this, we can get some seeds and start growing some real crops. Let's not waste any more time. I start to dig out even more room down in my cave here, and immediately start to set down all of the dirt that we have. We're going to finally make a real farm. Of course, this is still the captain, so even though I'm extremely desperate and very close to death, I do take a little extra effort to make sure that this place does look nice. I use the few pieces of iron that we have to make lanterns, which I put on the ceiling in the center of our new little farm. And while I am very, very desperate here, do not get me wrong. To be honest with you, I am so happy to be working on this farm. This is a huge step forward, and it does feel pretty good to get our footing here on this crazy alien world. Now, unfortunately, in this playthrough, we won't have a marketplace, so we won't be able to cheat our way into new seeds. The good news is, this won't just be wheat seeds. Thermal cultivation, which is in this mod pack, will get us a few other crops as well, starting with tomatoes. Then we even get a little bit of barley, some corn as well, and a couple of eggplants. You know I love that. And then a little bit of spinach. Not a huge fan, but we are desperate after all. I clear out a little bit more room, and I do add some wheat seeds here, just to be safe. After all, I don't really know how all these new crops are going to work just yet, so it's always good to have the old reliable wheat. It's already the night of day 6, and it has taken us quite a while to get this far. But I gotta say, we've caught up pretty well with this little farm right here. So right now, I'm feeling pretty confident. And while all those seeds are growing, I empty out my inventory, and I start to do our first real little mining run. I head down to find some iron, as well as a bunch of coal, and pretty quickly I'm releasing a ton of CO2 into the atmosphere, which isn't great. Luckily, I do go a little bit deeper and find the thing I'm really looking for: redstone. Now, with a little bit of iron, we can make a mechanisms tank that you can now carry around as much as 32 buckets of water much more easily. Now we just have to do one big run and fill up this tank on day 7. I read all of those comments that were yelling at me in the last video about how I was using the tank. Yeah, I might have deserved some of those. Yes, I finally do this and use these tanks as buckets for the rest of this video, so please, you can stop yelling at me in the comments and making me cry. I spend about as long as I can in the freezing cold of this night, collecting as much water as possible from all this ice. Speaking of water, it looks like there might be water here on the ground. That's kind of weird. That doesn't really make sense on a planet that's this cold. And at the time, I kind of just dismissed this. However, I come back once again to see that there is a little more water. The world is now raining. The carbon dioxide has heated up the atmosphere enough, now it's not just snowing. There's a mod that causes water to start to accumulate on the surface whenever it rains. This means that slowly, this world will start to flood, and that's really bad for me because I'm down at the bottom of a ravine. The water is now falling down through the chimney I built, into my base, ruining my farm. And what's worse than that is that some of this water is filled with sulfur and has become polluted, undrinkable, and unusable. There, right there, there's a huge bunch of water falling down the chimney right into the top of my base. I knew it. This is not a good thing at all. Every time some rainwater starts to fall down, I can put it over here and start to gather it up inside of my large tank. Great idea, right? Well, I get up to the surface to see that it's much worse than I thought. There are now large puddles of water that are gathering up, and it's starting to look like there's little lakes forming everywhere. This area used to be completely flat out of gravel. Why are there now like little pockets where blocks have clearly been removed and filled up with water? I have to run back down in here. I'm just gonna have to wait until morning, until there's better weather, to try to figure out what's going on out here. Then I see this. It's just a block of gravel, right? No big deal. But it actually might be the worst thing that I could have possibly seen. This shows me that this world has erosion. It's a mod that means that water can slowly turn cobblestone into gravel, then gravel into sand, and then into nothing. Some of the dirt from above my base is now broken down, and I can see a hole where the dirt used to be because it's turned into gravel and fallen down into my base. This means all the water forming above me will start to erode down into my base and flood it for sure. There's no way to stop this from eating up all the cobble. And I start to build a larger ravine to control what will definitely be a ton of water headed my way. But I'm going to need a much bigger plan than just this little canal. And for right now, my plan involves that slate, because I don't think that the slate is going to erode. All I know for sure is that dirt and cobble, gravel, and sand will definitely erode, but maybe the slate will actually be able to last. So I might be able to build my base out of it. Of course, I'm not just going to throw a bunch of ugly slate cobblestones up here. I've got to at least try to make it a little good looking. I make some polished slate pavement, and of course, set it all around the most important thing. No, it's not me, but thank you, I'm flattered. I start to make the entire roof of the farm out of slate, hoping that this will stop the erosion coming down from above. Also, I have to say, the slate does kind of have an aquatic look to it. I think it fits really well in the dark frozen look of this cave. And also, if we're being practical here, it's definitely not too difficult to collect. It's a nice, modest look for this farm that fits in pretty well with the environment, but also isn't just a bunch of cobblestone. And by the way, let me just address this really quickly. If you're thinking to yourself, if he's so desperate, if he's so close to death, why is he trying to make everything look good? In my opinion, if you completely succumb to the elements and you have to give up a piece of yourself, then you've already lost. Making our builds as desperate and as necessary as they are, with a little bit of beauty, is a small win. Even if we die, we leave behind a little piece of ourselves that will live on. But also, let's be serious here. Let's try not to die too. So I start to run down into the mines to gather up as many resources as I can to build whatever invention's coming up next to save our underground base. Then I run into the locals on this planet. Turns out all this extra carbon dioxide has actually managed to thaw out some of the deep water as the ocean is now starting to puddle up. All of this flowing water is starting to collect into lakes down here on the bedrock. And yes, I see that some of these slimes have grown down here as well. Now I'm not sure if they thawed out from the ice or if life finds a way. But either way, we see our first alien contact on this planet. They're not the only alien life, as now there's some fish spawning in these ancient oceans as well. I make a quick trip back to my base, and sure enough, I see a lot of water starting to collect all around me, so I know I have to hurry. Now, I make up some armor, since I can confirm that there will be some hostile life on this planet. And I also start to look into thermal expansion. I'm trying to see which of these machines can help us with all this water. For now though, my ADHD gets the best of me, because I immediately get distracted when I see these crops are ready to be picked. And so of course, that's what I'm doing. But what I really like is I see these corn growing 2 blocks tall. This is the kind of stuff I always think is so cool in modded crops. I'm definitely going to be growing some more corn. However, the puddling water is starting to fill up my ravine. That's not so cool. I'm really going to have to rush to try to figure out some kind of system to control all this water. Fast. It's not all bad news though, because finally we do find some diamonds. But also I do start to mine up some more coal too. I'm not super excited to be releasing more carbon dioxide in a planet that's already starting to heat up and flood. But to be honest with you, I wasn't really thinking about that too much. And this might have turned out to be a huge mistake. Just as I'm starting to think that I should leave the mine, head back up top, a ton of water starts to flood in. But I don't really understand why. I'm super deep underground. Where could all this water be coming from? As I'm walking back up the mine, I start to realize this isn't just a little bit of water. This is a ton of water. The closer and closer I get back to my base, the more and more the torrent of water starts to pour in on me. And then it hits me. If the water is this bad here, then imagine how bad it would be back up at my base. I start to swim up my mine shaft, fearing for the worst. But to be honest with you, I had no idea what I was really in store for. I get back to my base and I see it's gone. Completely wiped out. In the course of just about half of a day, enough water has filled this ravine to make it a small lake, and our base is completely submerged. This is disastrous. Obviously, our crops have been completely wiped out. Even though I was just starting to grow some food, we're now going to be going hungry once again. But it's even worse than that, because the water has also wiped out our cave roots. So now we're not going to be able to eat those either. This is going to take a ton of work in order to get all of this water out of here. And to be honest with you guys, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to do it. I got to admit it, guys, my heart was a little bit broken right here. And my first desperate attempt here to try to move all the water out was by filling it all in this tank. And then I get up to the surface and I realize, like, what am I going to do with all this water? The entire gravel flat has now become a lake. There's puddles of water everywhere. The gravel has eroded, making this area basically some kind of like strange frozen swamp. Just like I had feared, the surface now has so much water that it's pouring down into my base. There's really no way to stop this. I do run out to the ocean. I mean, after all, I can't dump all this water down here. Yes, that is a little bit of good news. Now I head back home to see just how desperate the situation is. I'm starting to think that building underground might not be an option anymore. The entire surface is now covered in water, and every time it rains, there'll be even more water. I can't hope to deal with it all. I look around to see every ravine, like the one I'm living in, has now become a small lake. In a matter of just 10 days, the amount of pollution I've dumped in this very fragile world has completely transformed it. I'm starting to realize that as this planet has changed, my tactics on how I'm going to survive here might have to change too. I get back to the original crash site to see that the area I woke up is now completely submerged in water. I'm also starting to see that water is flowing down from these giant mountains and starting to make lakes down here at the bottom, which means that soon all of this water will eventually flow to my base, becoming an even bigger problem. So as the sun is setting on day 10, I finally can no longer deny it. Building down in this ravine will no longer be building underground, but instead it'll be building underwater. I'm definitely going to have to find a new place to move all my stuff, because building down here in this ravine is just not an option anymore. I head down to grab my chest, and the good news is there's still a little bit of food here. This might actually save me, but food isn't our biggest problem. It's dark, and the tiredness is really starting to affect me once again. I'm going to have to make a plan and really start to stick to it. Am I going to save this underwater base, or make a new one? Either way, I have to hurry up here. To be honest with you, I kind of knew that this base was a lost cause. At the same time though, I'm still the captain. I was being a little stubborn here. I'd already grown pretty attached to this little base, and I didn't want to completely lose it. So I was trying to find a way to pull some of the water out. But yeah, it was becoming pretty obvious that this was a lost cause. But if there's any bright side, eating this alien fish did give me 2 extra hearts. They're 2 hearts I'm definitely going to need right now. After giving one more tank full a try and making no progress, I finally went up to the surface to see where am I going to put my new base. I decided that it would probably be smart to find some high ground, and I found this little gravel hill, and I started to add a new farm. Once again, my biggest problem here is that I'm just becoming way too tired. I'm already exhausted, so I'm going to have to build a bed as soon as I can. Just like before, we're going to have to get some hemp or some flax. The good news is, I was at least smart enough to save a few seeds as backup, including some hemp seeds. The bad news is, Captain is still a little bit stupid and very, very stubborn, as now I'm trying another plan to save the old farm and the old base. I was going to dig out a huge reservoir underground and try to empty out all the water even deeper down here. The bright side is, at least I did find some good ores while I was down here. I break open this last little block, and I let the water flow down underground. But just like before, the water is filling up from the top just as quick as it's running down. I was now at tiredness 4. Now it didn't matter how stubborn I was. I had to face reality. I had to move on. I grabbed one part of the chest using carry-on, a real lifesaver, and I set this up on the surface, trying to find a new place to put it. And although I did set up that little farm, this little cave up here is actually a few blocks higher than that farm I set out. It's an even better spot to try to figure out a way to stop all this water from flooding all of my things. In addition, because it's covered, hopefully the rain falling down on us won't be a problem either. Plus, let's be honest, this valley right here, with these giant mountains shooting up on both sides, definitely does look a lot better for building too. Now, for the third time in 12 days, we will be making yet another farm. Now, I'm going to be using the exact same blocks as I did with the old farm. It's kind of a little tribute to our original farm. Lost, but not forgotten. And yes, this time I build it up 2 blocks off the ground, so hopefully it won't flood. And at the very end of day 12, I have to say, even though we're still pretty desperate, I'm feeling a little bit of hope right here. But I can't stop and admire the view for too long. I still have to focus on getting that bed done, because I'm getting really, really tired. I head back to the old base to see that it's flooded even more since I've been gone, and I finally do grab the last chest. We're now at tiredness 6, and honestly, this is debilitating. Unfortunately, I was just too stubborn. I took way too much time trying to figure out how to save this lost cause of a base. Now I can barely move. It's taking me forever to get to our new cave. I have to drop this chest and try to make my bed right now. Luckily though, I can grab some of the phytogrow and run back to that second farm that I built up on that gravel hill. I start to grow up as much hemp as I can. We use a ton of phytogrow and our last little bits of wood to make planks. It doesn't matter how many resources I'm wasting though, I need this bed right now or I'll be dead by morning. I throw it down in the middle of nowhere here, just literally where my head fell, and take a much needed nap. At the start of day 14, I'm finally feeling much better. I don't have any food, or any water, or any shelter, but at least I have my stamina. Now I can try to fix all of those other problems once again. So I get to work immediately, and I start to carve out some of the cave to make a little more room. I place down the bed and the chest and get started making some brand new dirt. This requires getting quite a lot of gravel, which is a nice thing, because the more gravel we dig up, the lower and lower the water level should be. Combine this gravel with some dirt, and we can double the very small amount of dirt that we have, and now we're making some progress once again. At the end of the day, we're about halfway done with this farm, which hopefully we don't have to rebuild this farm again. Oh man, I suck at foreshadowing. By right about the middle of the night, we have all the slates set out, and the dirt has been tilled, and it's ready to get some hemp seeds in the ground. I even have a little extra dirt, which I set off to the side here. Hopefully, we'll be able to grow a little free-range grass here, and this is going to be very important for later. With our very first grass block down, now we just have to wait. The first crop in the ground is corn, because like I said, I really love this one. Just as the sun starts to rise on day 15, we jump into bed. Unlike most of my 100-day videos, we're probably going to have to sleep almost every single night to keep off this tiredness. So now on day 16, we finally take a trip back to our old base. I've decided I'm going to try to cannibalize some of the lanterns, but more importantly, I'm actually here because I'm desperately looking for some more cave roots. Remember, these are still our only source of wood. Sadly, no luck. The whole ravine has been rinsed clean, and we're gonna have to find some new way to get any kind of wood. I start to run around, and I'm hoping I can find a tree, or maybe some kind of vegetation, or like a new biome on this dead world. And just at the end of the day, I see something poking out at the top of the tallest peak up there. I don't think that's a natural structure. So, of course, I go rushing right towards it. I'm not seeing much of anything else going on up here. As I get to the very top of the mountain, just as the sun is setting, I see what looks like a massive tree, bigger than any tree I've ever seen before. But it's just the dead, hollowed out stump, and that's all that's left. This was really unsettling. Like, think about it. What is this long dead, fossilized stump doing on the top of this alien comet? Honestly though, I'm a little too desperate to stop and think about it for too long. I need this wood. What I don't need is to see a wither rose planted in the center of a fossilized, giant, creepy stump like this. The bad news is, it probably would have been a better idea to listen to those creepy omens we were seeing, because now we're facing a new creature called a blitz. This strange elemental creature hovers over you and drops blocks of ice on your head. Luckily, I managed to fight them off and hide from them all throughout the night. By the next day, we've got most of the tree carved out. Yes, there might be like a few logs somewhere hiding, or maybe even some saplings. But to be honest with you, I can't stay here for too much longer. I do, however, take a minute and start running around the top of these mountains. Well, I definitely wasn't expecting this. In the distance, I think I can see trees at the very top of another peak. But as I start to get a little bit closer, I realize they're actually on a floating island, which I believe is part of Tinker's construct. And I'm slowly seeing that this world is growing even more and more grass, and there's more growth all around me too. Unfortunately, there's still a few more hostile mobs spawning too. On top of the blitz, now attacking, I see Endermen are starting to spawn in. I start to fill my pockets with snowballs, hopefully I can use these as projectiles. Unfortunately, these blitz are a little more tanky than I thought. And now they're starting to come in some really big numbers too. I have to hide away in this cave filled with lava. Luckily with this tank though, I can pick up most of the lava. I can take this back to my base, which is great, but in the meantime, I still have to figure out how I'm going to get rid of this swarm of blitz outside. Until I get a little bit of luck right here, as they start to walk into the puddle of lava and they quickly start to burn themselves up one by one. Unluckily, as they're dying, they start to release clouds of sulfur, which poison me pretty badly. Again, reminding me why I definitely don't want any more pollution on this planet. Either way, we climb over the mountain ridge, back onto our side where our base is. I fill a brand new chest with all of our wood, and I gotta say I'm feeling much better to see this. On top of that, we finally have some of our very first space-grown corn. And I gotta say, it tastes a little bit tangy. I think I like it. And since thermal expansion has been so good to us, I decide to look into getting even more thermal series machines, as I see the Stirling Dynamo. The Stirling Dynamo is the first machine that you will build in thermal series, as it turns coal into RF. I don't exactly know what disasters are in store for us in the future, so for right now, I'm going to hide this generator in the back of our base. I put a little bit of coal in here, and it works. Right away, it's starting to make some cheap RF. I create a second dynamo because you guys already know that the first thing I'm going to try to do is make some kind of ore doubling system. In thermal series, this requires the pulverizer. So, with a little bit of clay, which has been made from erosion, and a tin gear, we can make a machine frame, which is the core of every thermal series machine. And with just 2 more copper gears, we finally have our very first machine. However, it's starting to get very dark at night. I decide I'm going to take some time to set out some torches to keep away all of these new hostile mobs, since I don't know what will be coming next. I make a simple piston next, and start to gather up some sand. The dirt that we had set out here to turn into grass is now eroding, turning into gravel and sand. This is not exactly what I was hoping for. I also wasn't hoping for a blitz to be spawning right inside my base. And I do manage to kill him. This is definitely not safe. I shouldn't have this happening anymore. I'm definitely going to line up the base and try to keep these things away. And at the very end of day 18, we finally start getting some more progress, and now we can test our new ore doubling system. I decide to make my love affair with corn official as I set out an entire plot of it. Also, before I get too carried away with all my new machines, I almost forgot. We have to go check out that floating island. Now this next part might be kind of stupid here. I decide to carve a cave through the mountains to get to the other side so I could more easily walk back and forth. To be honest though, I was also doing this because I wanted to mine up some more ores. Although yeah, still pretty stupid. But hey, it doesn't matter, because soon we break on through to the other side, and now I'm ready to get up to that floating mountain in the sky. I start cobbling my way up, and by the time I'm about 100 blocks into the sky, I realize I probably should have brought a bucket of water up here. Oh well, too late now, as I continue to go all the way up to the very top. I finally get up here, I dig through all the packed ice and the dirt, and then I finally see this beautiful tree, a bright blue frost blossom. With this aurora going on in the background, pretty quickly picks up my spirits. Just like everything else on this comet, it might be pretty dangerous and treacherous all around us, but there's definitely a sense of beauty and wonder here. This pristine, untouched floating island, high up in the upper atmosphere, surrounded by this beautiful aurora, does make this hostile world all around us seem a little more enchanting. I very quickly get back down to the surface and try to run back to the little hole I dug. I then immediately run into this guy camping in my cave. Yeah, so much for feeling like this place was safe. And that's not even the worst of it. I get back to my base to see that the bad news has just begun. I see that once again, it's now raining in this valley, which means that the rain will fall from the sky and start to wash away my crops. Even if the flooding level it doesn't get anywhere close to this farm, the crops will still not be safe until they have some kind of covering from above. So of course, that'll be our next priority. Now, to make that cover, we will need some building materials. So of course, we start planting these saplings. First, in this little patch of grass that we have, and soon, I start to take blocks of dirt and spread them all across the valley floor. I definitely want to make sure that for the rest of this playthrough, we never have to worry about wood again. Also, let's just be honest, I was kind of hoping that these trees might make the whole landscape look a little bit nicer too, but I'm definitely not done there. As I start to plant even more flax seeds, as well as getting my lovely eggplant emojis, some peanuts, and finally we squeeze in some green beans too. Now, I craft up a diamond pickaxe and get ready to do a little bit of mining. I want to gather up a ton of materials to make a proper garden for my farm. And while I'm out here, I dig all the way down to the bottom of these giant ocean beds. While I definitely know that this could be a potentially dangerous area, I mean, I'm already seeing a bunch of blitz out here, I'm also thinking that this could be a great opportunity to get a ton of ores. And so, we finally get all the way down to the bottom, right around day 20. And as soon I see that a ton of this rain has collected, and these lakes are getting pretty deep. While we're down here, I definitely make sure to grab a ton of fish. I also grab some redstone, iron, and even an emerald. I also grab some osmium, just in case we do decide to do some mechanisms. And by day 21, my inventory is already starting to look pretty good. I grab a little bit of lapis as well. And then, honestly, just kind of messing around with the water physics here, just having some fun. I cut out this trench here so that the water will start to flow from this upper lake down into the lower one. I have to say, this little man-made waterfall is pretty cool looking. I never get tired of realistic water physics. I still don't understand why Minecraft just doesn't have better water physics in vanilla. Yeah, well, actually, forget I said that. I definitely should be more careful about what I wish for. When I get back to the surface, I see that all the trees are growing just as the sun is rising. Now, I start to set up our new ore doubling system. As the sun is rising on day 22, I get a chance to see that a lot of the ground right out in front of our base is starting to erode. But at the same time, the water level seems to be getting higher too. I am not so glad to see that my suspicions about the water were definitely true. I can see even from way out here that the water is now definitely starting to flow and it's coming towards us. But I do see that we get a small break here. A lot of the water is flowing right past us. It's going down into this cave beneath my farm. But this surely won't save us forever. Soon that'll fill up and we'll have to find a more permanent solution to stop my base from flooding again. So I decide this time the simplest answer is probably the best one, as I start to figure out a way to dig a man-made trench from the mountains all the way down to the sea. Just then, I get a peek at the mountainside, and I see a huge waterfall flowing down from the very top. Clearly, the warming atmosphere is melting these glaciers way up high in these mountains, and a huge amount of water is torrenting down them, rushing into my valley. Now, the good news is the massive dried up ocean beds aren't that far away, so most of the draining glacier should run right past us. I'm digging as wide and as deep as I can, and as fast as I can. The good news is, sure, a ton of water is shooting right past us, and this new river goes straight into the ocean, making another massive waterfall going all the way down to the bedrock level. Honestly, this right here would be pretty awesome. Unfortunately, I'm a little too preoccupied being terrified about the flooding. I quickly run back to my base to see if any of this is working. The good news is, it does seem to be doing a little bit of help. The bad news is that the entire valley floor is now absolutely completely flooded and submerged underwater. It's very clear to me that the tiny river we've made is not going to be able to handle all of this water. So I start to fill up my bucket with as much water as I can. And no, I'm not planning to take all this and run it over to the ocean. I have a much better plan this time. I'm going to be using this water with some clay, gravel, and sand to make immersive engineering concrete. I can tell that this is going to be a pretty long process. So in the downtime, I am going to set up the pulverizer very quickly. I do make the decision that I should take all these machines and place them outside. I don't know if they're waterproof, but I do know that I don't want all this sulfur building up inside of my base, right next to where I sleep. One of the big reasons that I made this pulverizer was to turn gravel into sand, which is exactly what we need to make even more concrete. But with all this mining and flooding and panicking, what we really need is to go to bed. And yes, this does take a little bit of time. I think you might have to lay in bed until the entire tiredness debuff goes away. I don't know, eventually it takes like 30 seconds. But I do go to sleep, and now we get into day 23. Now, before this water situation really gets out of hand, I start to set out the first of our concrete. The idea here is that we're going to be creating a levee system. Mostly, we're going to be trying to keep the large body of water in the far side of the valley. Hopefully, the water closest to my base won't rise too much higher, and we should be able to control it much more easily. Now, my hydro engineering skills aren't quite up to the standards of the Dutch, but I do think I'm doing a pretty good job here at keeping my home from flooding. I decide to run this concrete in the exact same line that I set out all my trees, since I did set them out on sort of a high ground in the valley in the first place. For now, this concrete wall is only about 3 blocks tall, but the water could get higher and go over the top. Not to mention, remember, the gravel beneath the cement could erode. This concrete barrier is extremely helpful, but it is by no means a final solution. We'll still have to figure out some way to get rid of all this water. That being said, in the meantime, we do finally get the entire base covered, and now hopefully the water will go right past our base towards the ocean. And of course, the only thing stopping me from making even more concrete is the lack of sand, and the pulverizer is doing a pretty good job of making that too. Luckily, the concrete is pretty cheap. I continue to work on this for the rest of the day, hoping the more work I put into this, the more time it will buy me to figure out a more permanent solution. That being said, as I look around me, it's very obvious that the water level is getting higher and higher every single day. Still, I get a chance to stop and look out the front of my base. I gotta say, there's a lot of promise here. It's not looking too great right now, but I think we could change that eventually. Now, the first thing I definitely recognize right here is that I'm probably not going to be able to get rid of all this water, and that's okay. I'm totally capable of learning to adapt to live with it. So, I make some spruce slabs, and I start to set out a dock walkway sort of thing. And with this, I'll be better able to move around all of the flooded areas in my home. I also added a mod that has these new framed cubes, which I think do look pretty cool. I then start to set out some of the slabs, which is of course what we'll be walking on, but unfortunately, when they touch the new frame blocks, they kind of look strange here. So I decide to add some good old spruce logs here, and I do think this pulls the whole look together. More importantly, for right now, it'll have to do. I don't have much time to waste trying to make a perfect build with all this water rising. By that night, I've wrapped the entire walkway all around the farm, and I've even made it all the way out to the levee, so I can get here much quicker. I then start to make a very simple platform out here on the levee. And I'll need this, because this is where we're going to begin our next project. In the meantime, I should probably finish our very first project as I start to finally get our ore doubling system done. By the start of the next day, I see that I can actually place the machines directly next to each other. I then put a chest on both sides, no hoppers required. Now, I can set ores on the far right chest, where it will then go into the pulverizer, getting smashed up and multiplied. If I configure both machines correctly, the dust will move into the redstone furnace, where it will then be cooked up, finally being pushed out into the last chest on the far left. In the meantime, I take some bone meal down to the bottom of the lake, and I try to grow some kelp, but yeah, no luck. I am going to have to try to figure out some way to get kelp on this broken, dead world. But for right now, I'm focusing on using Create. Create is an amazing mod. It's probably one of my favorite, right next to Nuclear Craft. However, it requires a good amount of wood, so it's not too useful on alien planets. Of course, with all the spooky deadwood we've managed to find at the top of that mountain, Create might just work out perfectly here. I then use some iron to make an iron block, and some wood and andesite to make andesite casing. We then make some buttons, which we can then use to make little cogs. And now we can put all that together to get our very first machine in Create, the mechanical press. But just before I start to get to work with this thing, I decide to give my farm just a little bit of love. I grab a peanut for a snack, and I start to set down even more seeds, so that the farm will be a little closer to complete. After that short little labor of love, I head over to the platform that I've set out on the levee, and now I can put down the mechanical press. With no way to generate any torque, which is the type of power you use in Create, I'm gonna have to rely on an old-fashioned crank and do this by hand. I start cranking, and sadly the copper is not being smashed, which at first was really worrying. However, normally when a tech mod isn't working for me, the first thing I blame is my brain. Luckily, that was the case here too. By adding a slab so that this would only be 1 block away from the press, we could throw the copper in this gap and start smashing. I throw in a bunch of copper and start cranking away all night. Phrasing. And even though I traded away all my calories, I make myself pretty hungry, I do manage to get a bunch of copper plates. I take some peanuts, a little bit of alien fish, and some corn. And we top it all off with getting a slice of bread before we head to bed. I didn't even try to rhyme that time. And then we lay in bed for a really long time. And no, do not worry, I'm not going to continue to do any more rhyming. I know these videos are cringe enough as it is. Luckily, by the next morning, we are well rested and no longer rhyming. We can start to get to work on our next machine. We make a fishing rod, and with a few other simple components, including the copper gears and a little glass, soon we get an aquatic entangler. This is an interesting thermal series machine that automatically fishes for you if you set it down underwater. We are also going to add a junk net to it, and hopefully it can grab us some kelp as well. In the meantime, we're going to start to use those copper plates we got last night to make some copper pipes. Combine this with a cog, and we can get a pump. And I think you guys already know where I'm going with this. We set this pump down so that it could be pumping water out of my side of the levee. I do a quick test here. I set up a cog and a crank, and in no time, I start to see the water particles on the other side of the pump. Next, a water source spills out into the valley, and I quickly see that this pump might actually work, even without the kelp. This is perfect. And now then again, I can't hope to empty this entire lake by hand. So of course, I start to look up the windmill. No, I'm just kidding. I'll spell it correctly. A new windmill. We get our first windmill bearing, and now we just have to get some string to make our sails. Luckily, we can get our string from the flax or our industrial hemp. With both of these grown, we should have a ton of sails. In total, we can get 6 wool, which makes us 40 sails. That should be more than enough. I also see that the entangler has gotten us some leather, which is a big deal on a planet with no cows. And then I decide to start making even more cogs. This is Captain's classic big cog, little cog speed up system. Gotta think of a better name for that. Which will speed up the spinning rate of the windmill to something that will actually be usable for this pump. I throw down a large cog on the bottom, then put the windmill bearing with a block of slate on the very top. I start to add all the sails on the block of slate. By the time I'm finally finished, we have a windmill that's about 3 blocks wide and I think about 4 blocks tall, which I think should be perfect, even if it's a little bit slow. To speed it up, we connect a small cog on the side of the large cog. Then on the same axis, we connect another large cog. Then on the side of that large cog, we put another small cog and repeat this process, acting kind of like a transmission to speed up the rotation of all the cogs. And finally, at the end of all this, this pump is moving at a decent speed, and now it should be pumping a ton of water automatically out of my lake in towards the big ocean. And this is a really big win for us and for managing water in the first 25 days. Or at least that's what I thought at first. For some reason, this system will pump out some water, but then it breaks down pretty quickly. If you really want this system to work, you're going to have to make a hose pulley, which means we're going to have to find that kelp after all. That is a little disheartening, I have to admit. But as I walk back to my base, I see my beautiful little farm surrounded in these trees, and I'm a little bit more inspired. Looking at this, I am reminded of what I'm fighting for. So let's get that kelp and drain this swamp. The bad news is, the aquatic entangler doesn't really seem to be working for us quite as well as I hoped. The good news is that when you put bone meal in the pulverizer, 1 bone turns into 20 bone meal, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. The start of the next day, I head out past my pump system towards the open ocean. I'm hoping that I can use some bone meal to bone meal the floor of the ocean and get some kelp. I jump down our gigantic man-made waterfall and get to the bedrock sea floor. I set down some dirt, but sadly no luck. This doesn't seem to help us get any kelp. But I haven't given up just yet. I look around and see that there are some patches of sand and gravel. Maybe there's still some semblance of an ocean bed somewhere out here. I go out hoping I can still find some kelp. And after searching for days, I finally do manage to find this tiny little pool right here with a little bit of kelp in it. And I would stay out here to see if there's anything else going on, but I'm already getting impacted by some pretty brutal tiredness, so I have to head home fast. I now have to take a long trip over a long, vast, frozen wasteland. But to be honest, I'm starting to see more grass and flowers grow all over this world. The planet is slowly thawing, for better or for worse. But nowhere on this planet is as thriving and as lively as my base. The first thing I do when I get back home is I find a shallow area and I do plant all this kelp, so I'm never running out of it ever again. The second thing I do is cook up some of the kelp. You do have to make some dried kelp to get the hose pulley. Now finally, by day 27, I can head over to the pump setup and place down the pulley directly on the back of the pump. I use the hand crank to try to lower the pulley, but unfortunately it's not working here. I'm not 100% sure why. Looks like nothing can ever be easy for the captain. Soon enough though, after working with the gear system a little bit here, I finally do manage to get the hose pulley all the way down to the bottom of the water. And by that night, I finally have this pump system working once again. Like I said, nothing can be easy for the captain. The problem this time is that for some reason, the pump is now headed in the wrong direction. And while that's definitely kind of frustrating, I'm not going to let it break my spirit. I just take this chance to put more and more lanterns all over the walkway and all over my base. Even if this world can be a little bit spooky, dark, and hostile, just a few lanterns here and there does make this place look a little more cozy. But I can't let the coziness distract me, not just yet. I get some gold and I smash it up in the press. With this, I can quickly make our wrench. With the wrench, I can change the direction of the pump, so now it will be facing outward. And just like that, we get our industrial spillage achievement. This lets me know that the job is finally done, because now the pump will automatically be taking tons of water from inside my base and pushing it out to the other side of the levee, keeping us nice and dry. At the start of day 28, I get a good look all around my little area. And I gotta say, I'm pretty proud of the work we've put in so far. And this is just the beginning. Already, the water level has massively dropped down. I can see entire areas of blocks that used to be underwater. Half of this little lake has been completely dried up. And while I could do a little extra work here and try to suck out every drop, I'm actually pretty happy with what we've got going on here. I dig a small little channel to get some of the water out, so I'll have a little more control. But having a nice little pond here doesn't seem that bad. I do grab a little bit of dirt out of the pond, and I get ready to start spreading it around, which is good. I then find a bunch of polluted water running down the mountainside into this pond, which is obviously not so good. My industry is creating a lot of sulfur, which is mixing with the rainwater and is starting to collect here, making a disgusting patch of polluted water in my pond. I then do something that's equally disgusting, and I use a diamond to make a shovel. Normally I don't do this, so whenever I see people using diamonds to make shovels and hoes, it kind of hurts to watch. But in a world made entirely out of gravel, I might actually get some use out of this. It does make it much easier and much quicker to collect all the dirt that's just sitting down here at the bottom of the pond. Also, I can use it to grab all this gravel, which helps build a little channel all the way over to the pump. And of course, I can then combine all the dirt and all the gravel to make a pretty good chunk of coarse dirt. And with that, my inventory is almost completely loaded up by that night. Although it's almost pitch black, I do head out and start to add a ton of this dirt to our levee. I start out by putting some cobble here. Yes, I know that this cobble can be eroded, but if we place it on the inside of the levee, it should never get wet, and then it shouldn't ever erode. Plus, this will make the entire levee much bigger and seem more natural, almost like a giant earthwork. At the start of the next day, I do get the rest of the concrete and seal the cobble in the center. But maybe more importantly, I do get around to plugging all the gaps. Unfortunately, as I had feared, some of the gravel is starting to erode underneath the levee. This might let some water in if we're not careful. It's not great news, so I am going to have to spend almost all day making sure that I place concrete very thoroughly on both sides of the levee. Which, I'll be honest, when it comes to making a YouTube video, this part isn't too exciting. But what is pretty nice to look at is that after I've done all this, I can finally start to set out all the dirt on the top of the levee. Now it won't be this dark brown slag color. I also decide to add some sand on the valley side where the water is. It makes it kind of look like a little beach here, although in my heart I know that this probably will start to erode pretty quickly. But what can I say? I'm a sucker for aesthetics. Speaking of that, I now start to make some real headway on covering the entire top of the levee in dirt. At the start of the next day, I almost have the entire levee covered in coarse dirt. Now all of this, it's definitely a lot of work, and it's a lot of time spent that really isn't about function. But the thing is, if you're a good engineer, you can be efficient with very few resources, including time. This will lead you plenty of time and resources to work on more important things, which is the beauty of this home. In a way, this is kind of the perfect meeting of the left and the right side of your brain. When I'm finally done, I'm feeling really proud of a system that is very efficient at controlling the water, but also is really starting to look beautiful. Well, kind of. I mean, it definitely has a lot of potential. It will look beautiful. I still have a lot of work to do, though. Speaking of automation really helping us out here, we can grind up even more gravel and start to make more sand to expand our beaches. But we can do that later. For right now, I've been staying up too many days putting down all that dirt. I'm exhausted. Let's go to bed. As the sun rises on the next day, I get ready to set out even more sand. But I gotta say, just seeing this in the daylight, it's already looking pretty good. This is definitely motivating me to put even more work into this little levee. The erosion is definitely still a huge pain, and I'm putting that in the very front of my mind, but at the same time, I have to admit, it does kind of help us here, because it creates sand from gravel, which we're going to dig up and take advantage of right away. And while this area just outside of my base that's exposed to the elements looks super eroded and all shredded up, I'm hoping that inside of our little levee, we can have a more natural, more serene look. Walking around inside of this little area I have here, I think it's starting to really come together. And again, seeing my little walkway lit up that night does make me feel a little bit better. However, as excited as I am to see this world looking a little bit better, a little more natural, I do realize I haven't done any real building of my base, so that should definitely be the next thing on our list. Although, at the same time, putting a few more pieces of sand and gravel on the outside of our levee, it's really a ton of fun. And to be honest with you guys, I could probably work on this for like another 100 days just by itself. But I know eventually I'm gonna have to start focusing on making our builds. I still have to protect all of my crops after all. At the start of the next day, I set down my single block of grass. Now, we just have to wait for nature to take its course and cover this entire little hill in grass. Pretty soon though, the weather starts to turn bad here, and this rain reminds me that our crops are not safe. I already see a little bit of water splash down inside of the pond, which is great, because now our water is definitely renewable. We're being naturally fed more rainwater, and we won't run out. But at the same time, it's already day 32, and I remember I'm going to have to change my focus and make sure that my garden doesn't get washed away by the exact same water. So we grab some spruce. I do make sure to set down the saplings on the levee so that we don't run out of spruce. And to be honest with you, I might be going a little overboard here. And unfortunately, I come back to my farm to see that a huge chunk of crops have already been wiped out by the flooding. It turns out I really was getting way too distracted. Time to get back to the builds. Step 1 is to get some electrum. We do this by mixing gold and silver, then smashing them with our hammer. We need this to get our speed upgrades for our machines. And we need speed upgrades because I have fallen pretty far behind. We really got to catch up here. I make some more electrum, which of course I use to make even more speed upgrades. And soon, the pulverizer is full of speed upgrades. Now, let's go to bed. Hopefully, sleeping will get rid of this bad weather. At the start of the next day, I look out to see that the grounds look amazing. The sky, not so much. It's starting to get kind of disgusting. There are thick clouds of pollution everywhere, and even though I don't want to add to these, that's for sure, unfortunately, my industry is working off of coal, so I have to head out and mine even more of it, and eventually we'll be creating a ton of carbon once we burn this stuff for power. Putting more coal into my industry is definitely a problem, and it's getting worse and worse. Unfortunately, fixing the environment was something that was a little more low priority to me. Spoken like a true capitalist. Either way, these single Stirling dynamos aren't producing enough energy to fix my machines, so no matter what, I have to find some kind of solution right now. My garden, once again, is just gonna have to wait. Now, I've used almost all of Mechanism's generators except for the wind turbine. Up here in these huge mountains with the winds whipping all around, and I'm thinking this might be the perfect place to try out a brand new power generation system. Unfortunately, to make these generators, you have to make a few Mechanism's machines first. That's nothing too new for us though, we've done this before. The first machine we're going to need is the infuser, which we place where the redstone furnace used to be. And now we fill it up with a little bit of redstone. First, we put in some osmium. This makes our first basic computer chips. Then we put in some iron to make our first infused alloy. The good news is we can start to get our first wind turbine. And my suspicions were correct. As I read in the description that the higher altitude you place a wind turbine, the more power it will produce. Now the good news for us is that we have these massive mountains, which should be perfect for these things. The bad news is, the higher up that we place them means that the more and more cables we'll need to run the power all the way back down to our base. So for now, we're stuck just making more steel. As now I craft up an enricher, and I start to enrich some coal. This will make the coal last a little bit longer in the steel making process. I have to go up to the mountains as quickly as I can, and try to place this renewable energy source. The good news is, way up here, it's making a ton of power right away. So, I decided to take advantage of it, as I place the infuser up here, which will be making steel. We'll let this sit up here for right now, as it should be creating a good amount of steel. Finally, by that night, all the iron has been turned into enriched iron. It just has to be run through the machine one more time to make steel. So with our first little bits of steel, we can finally start to make some of our cables. But like I said, I pretty much already know that these aren't going to be strong enough. With a second infuser, full of redstone, I start to make more infused alloys, which make advanced cables. But after seeing all of that pollution, deep down, I know I'm going to have to really double my efforts and invest even more into clean energy. I continue to make even more wind turbines so that we'll never burn any more coal ever again. By the end of the day, I have a total of 5. This will produce way more energy than even advanced cables could hope to hold. Even though I only have about 2 diamonds left, I'm willing to invest both of them for the sake of protecting the environment. I head back up the mountain to set up my entire wind farm. And now I gotta say, these things are already looking pretty amazing. The cloud of sulfur rising up into the air, it's a little less amazing, but hopefully this will be the last one we ever see. We place our diamonds in the infuser, as well as our infused alloy, and soon they'll be upgraded into reinforced alloy. Now we can use this with the advanced cables to make elite cables. I end up with a stack of 64, and I hope that this is enough to make it all the way down the mountain. Although, what am I going to do if it isn't? I've run out of diamonds. So, now I start to run the massive cable all the way from these wind turbines down the side of the mountain and straight towards my machines. The good news is, we'll never have to add one more drop of carbon into the atmosphere after all of this is done. The bad news is, we did end up a little bit short, and I have to finish the very end of this cable by using advanced cables instead. I'm hoping that this doesn't bottleneck our power usage, but for now, we should have more than enough power to run the machines that we have. And now we can set them all up on the power grid. We do have a little extra steel, which I do make into some steel scaffolding. Maybe one of my favorite blocks. I'm using this and adding it to the side of the cave, so I have this nice little catwalk, a little better of a platform to access all of my cleanly running machines. This tiny little lab right here, I'll admit, it's not too impressive. However, I'm still pretty proud of it, because it's running completely on clean energy, And the only thing it's really doing is producing more blocks to make the environment look even better. And with that, I can head to bed feeling pretty good about what we've done today. At the start of day 36, after a hearty fish breakfast, I finally upgrade my armor set to osmium, which is just a little bit lower than a diamond set. Now I head out to gather some spruce for building materials. I take a quick look behind me, back at my base, with the wind turbines up on the mountain, looking pretty good. More importantly, right here in this little spot of grass, I see that there's weeds growing, meaning that this is absorbing the carbon dioxide and cleaning the atmosphere. This process takes a long time, but hopefully, if we add no more carbon and keep on growing our grass, we'll be able to clean up the skies. And so the rest of my day is pretty relaxed, grinding up some cobble to make even more gravel and dirt, and feeling pretty good. I had honestly almost forgotten just how much the rain was really threatening us and our crops. But for the moment, I was too focused on trying to spread the grass and clean up these skies. I mean, seriously, look, I even finally broke that diamond shovel trying to scoop up all this dirt. The next day, I head out and do a little more mining, because this has reminded me I'm completely out of diamonds. I head straight down to the bottom of the ocean beds, down at level 11, and while my area might be looking a little more pristine, I have completely forgot just how alien this world can be. This deep underground cavern looks like something out of Metroid Prime. Oh, wait, do you guys even play Metroid? Did I just expose myself there? Anyway, it doesn't matter. What matters is I find yet another fossilized giant stump deep down under the world. And this time, instead of a wither rose in the center of it, there's actually a fully grown tree. It's a cold blue wisteria. And while this area is pretty creepy, it's like super unsettling down here, I am pretty excited to have found this. If I can get this back home, we'll have a second species of tree, which could really add to our landscape. A key word there is if. These hostile mobs are making this difficult. And this creepy, dark underground cave, it's really starting to give me the spooks. Now I have to fight my way through Endermen and Blitz, but eventually I find my way to the light and I start to head up to the surface. Or at least that's what I would have done if I was smart. To be honest, I get a little greedy here, and I continue to do a little more mining. I still want those diamonds. And it turns out this time, greed actually did pay off. I find a huge deposit of scoria. Oh, and I do eventually find those diamonds. I guess those are cool too. Finally, I do start to head up to the surface, and with my inventory completely full, I start heading back across the desolate ocean floor. Now, my inventory is completely full, and I start to head back to base, going across the desolate ocean floor. The good news is, I was right about finding diamonds down here. I quickly find a vein of them. And another. And another. And another. By the end of this, I grab about 14 diamonds, and even though it did take a few days, I'm feeling like this was a pretty good haul, and I start to head home. I head back to my base, and soon I start to set out all of my scoria. See, the idea here is that much like the concrete, the scoria should not be affected by erosion. Also, this dark brown color does kind of make it look good as the floor of my dirt. And by making the entire floor of my pond in my base out of scoria, it shouldn't cause more water to flood in from the outside. And now that I have even better control of the erosion, I'm feeling safe enough to start to add dirt out here on the low areas. Normally down here, this dirt would immediately get washed away. But the upside is, by adding dirt here and adding even more grass, I can get rid of even more pollution. Now, let's set down our brand new trees and see how they look when they grow. I can say I definitely know how they look as a building block. I was hoping to add this brand new wood in our very first build. Yeah, it kind of has this murky gray look. When I strip it, it just looks even worse. Now it's like baby puke pale green. To be honest with you, it kind of reminds me of birch, but like it's been soaked in the gutter for too long. And maybe I'm just hating here. Maybe you guys could find a better way to use this block in a build. But for me, I'm not talented enough, and I'm not up to the task. At the start of the next day, I'm headed back to the wood I trust, know, and love. We start to get some spruce ready for our garden safe house. But first, I still have to do a little more work around here, covering this area of the pond with scoria. And soon, the jagged and shredded, mismatched, eroded floor of my pond is replaced with a uniform scoria look, which I can now top with some dirt. and hopefully a little grass. That night, just like on the outside, I even decide to add some sand all around this area where it touches the water. Yes, I know this might erode, but I still think it looks pretty good even if it's temporary. Soon, I start to lay out all of the coarse dirt as I spend the rest of the night making this huge open plain inside of my compound. It takes a long time to set it all out, and then of course I have to go over it all again with a hoe. And it takes us all the way into day 41. But I'm hoping that if we can get all this covered in grass and convert it into something a little more natural looking, it'll all pay off. I do one more big cycle where I shovel up all the dirt and all the gravel, but finally we have a respectable amount of dirt. With all this, we can cover a little bit of the hillside, connect it up to the levee, and even then connect all of this to the little inner plains and flat areas around the ponds. Obviously, it's important to try to connect all the dirt so that my few precious pieces of grass will start to spread everywhere. By the start of the next day, I'm finally changing my focus to my garden. I know I keep saying that, but this time it's for real. I start to do that by turning some of the sand into sandstone so that I can make some coke oven bricks. And soon, I'm ready to set out a brand new 3x3 coke coal oven. I decide I'm going to place it right over here with all my dirt. The reason I took so much time first to focus on getting this dirt ready was because this coke coal oven will make a little more pollution. By setting it right here next to the grass, it should immediately absorb all that carbon dioxide. This made the process of getting building materials much longer, but in the end, it's clean and it will definitely be worth it. The downside of taking so much time to get this set up properly and responsibly is that the water is doing some permanent damage to my farm. This time it's pretty serious. Not only have the crops been wiped out, but even the dirt and the farmland itself has been eroded in massive chunks here. By being irresponsible with the environment in my first few days, it's now starting to fight back and rip out pieces of my farmland. Honestly though, I can't even be mad. I kind of deserve this. But I'm still definitely going to have to try to play around this. And finally, we get our coke coal oven functional. I even decide to add a second coke coal oven to speed up the process since now we really have to hurry. Unfortunately, that is going to take some time. Everything does. So now we still have to wait, which is bad. However, there is some good news right now. The tiny little bit of the mountain that we've covered in dirt is finally starting to grow grass all over it. And soon, all of this carbon that we've been producing that's been heating up the world should be absorbed by all of this grass. I do see that my farm is taking even more damage and more of the crops and dirt are being destroyed. But unfortunately, I'm just too tired to do anything about it right now. I rush to try to head to bed before any more damage happens, but I can't because Endermen are running through my base now, and I have to fight them before I can even go to sleep. Or at least I try to fight them. When your tiredness becomes so extreme, it starts to mess with your brain here and your combat abilities. I can barely swing and do any damage this entire fight. It's almost like it's moving in slow motion or something here. It makes it really difficult and honestly really dangerous. It also means that it takes me about 4 times longer to eat food and regain health. Yet another reason why you should not be staying up late, kids. Luckily, I just barely managed to get to bed and to the start of day 43. Now I should be able to get back to work. Sadly, the coke coal ovens haven't made any progress. What's worse is the environment is still fighting back. Rain has fallen down the mountainside and is now falling on top of the new little area of dirt, and it's immediately starting to erode it. So I decide I'm gonna have to make a canal that lets the rainwater run from the mountaintops down around the grass and into my lake. Unlike in real life, where erosion happens best when there's running water, in this mod pack, it only happens when water is actually sitting still. So if the realistic water is rushing downstream towards this lake, there should be minimal time for it to erode. And I should keep most of this dirt that I worked so hard to get. The good news is, after we've done this, the coke coal ovens are finally making us a good amount of creosote oil. We need this oil to make blocks that will be part of our build, as creosote oil makes treated wood. We turn our treated wood into treated wood scaffolding, which might be one of the most beautiful blocks I've ever seen. In combination with the spruce, this rich, dark, saturated looking wood with planks and nails as details on top, and with the scaffolding on the sides is exactly what I want in this build. With spruce logs acting as the main supports on all the sides, the treated scaffolding is then perfect as a connecting block, and now I run it in between all of the spruce supports. Like so many other beautiful builds, spruce logs look great as main supports. Although we are clearly in the future and we are a space-traveling civilization, I've decided I don't want this part of my build to look too futuristic and industrial. I'd like it to be kind of cozy, to reflect the nature of the farm that it's protecting. Now that being said, it is still clearly a modern building. Therefore, this modern look with the scaffolding, I think, is a perfect compromise. It's a great block for this build. It took a long time to get, but I think it is very, very worth it. Soon, the basic frame of our first build is really taking shape, with the 4 pillars of spruce connected by the treated wood scaffolding. I fall in love with the scaffolding so much that I decide I want to add even more of it, which unfortunately means we're going to need even more creosote oil. Luckily, soon enough, we have some, and we're back to working on setting up the framework. I was liking the look so far, but now it was time to focus on the details. So of course, I defaulted back to one of my favorite and most trusted ways to make any top of any build. We get some spruce slabs and start to put them in as a sloped roof. In my opinion, adding slabs make a better slope for a roof than adding stairs. I know what I just said right there is absolutely blasphemy. Like everybody you know uses stairs in their roofs on their builds. And I'm not trying to knock it, I know that it's a good look. But in my opinion, that just makes the slope of the roof a little too high. A house with just stairs as the roof kind of looks like a kid drawing when you try to make your very first house and the roof is basically just a triangle. Seriously, I'm not trying to hate here, but in my opinion, for my builds, I like to make a more realistic, more gentle slope. Now, I'm even running more treated wood down the middle on top of these spruce supports. I might be getting a little overboard here, but I just can't help it. I love these treated wood scaffoldings just that much. I continue to add more and more slabs all the way through to the next morning. And finally, I start to work on the back side, trying to make it look just like the front. Now I could run these slabs all the way down the middle of the roof and connect them. This would cover the farm nicely and keep away all the rain. But I think I might go for something a little bit extra here. In the meantime, I finish up with even more treated wood, and I fill in with some slabs to add the perfect level of detail. Not too much, just enough love to make the front look really nice. Soon, we crush up some bone meal to white dye and some lapis into blue dye, and that'll be for later. For right now, we use our shears and start to collect the leaves from our brand new tree, leaves that are both blue and green. But I also decide to grab some of the frosty blossom leaves as well. I can combine these with spruce and make a frosty blossom hedge. Now, after adding a wraparound of dirt all the way around the farm, I can then plant these hedges, and they'll add a natural barrier all the way around the garden. At first, I'm going to be honest with you, I was just going to plant these hedges down on the ground. But when I see how good they look, as they go up into the sky, I start to fall in love with them. And I got to admit, I start going a little crazy here. To be honest, this was pretty quickly getting carried away. I definitely do like this look, but I think I could make it a little bit better. However, the trend doesn't stop at the start of the next day. I still add even more leaves all the way around the top. And I even start to fill in the gaps down at the bottom too. To be honest though, even at the time I was doing this, I already kind of knew I was getting a little carried away here. I did leave a little room in the front and the back so that I can walk in and out. And that's when I see that this side here, the side that's a little less crowded, actually kind of looks a little better. I take a look at the sides, and I'm starting to see that they're just a little too busy. Too many hedges here. So I definitely think I am going to have to change this. But first, of course, the classic look. We're going to add some spruce trapdoors all the way around these hedges to make them look like proper planters. Then, since I do have so many slabs already, I decide why not. And I start to make the opening of my cave look a little nicer too. Jumping in and out of your base is fine, but honestly, it's time to add some kind of staircase. So I start to add a slanted stairway that went from the walkway diagonally right up to where the furnaces are. I will admit, This staircase is definitely very unrefined. It's definitely focused more on function and helping me move around a little bit better, but it'll have to do for right now. Finally, we use our dyes to make light blue dye. Then we add it to our glass. Now we get it ready to add it to the build. I start to place it on the roof, but I only place it every other block. I leave these gaps in between the glass, and I fill those with the green and blue wisteria leaves. These will function to cover the crops from the incoming rain, but also they'll give this build a much more natural look, making it look less like a shed and more like a thriving garden. Now we have some lanterns. We add those inside too. With this light shining, with all the leaves on the top and all on the sides, combined with the colorful crops growing everywhere, it made the inside of this build look amazing. This cozy little build, filled with all this color and life, and just the right amount of light with deep, rich wood accenting, is exactly the kind of build I was hoping for. Now, it's already day 45. This did take me a little while, and this is just my first little build. But I was so happy with how this turned out. And at the start of day 46, seeing this build lit up in the daylight, it made me realize this is exactly the kind of mark I want to leave on this planet. Although, eventually, like I said, after looking at these frost blossom leaves all the way around the top, I did decide it was time to make a change here. Although this build is looking amazing, a little more detail won't hurt. I remove all these leaves at the very top border, and I replace them with the green and blue wisteria leaves, which I think adds a little bit more color, but more importantly, it separates them and really makes them pop from the hedges. While the outside of this building was looking amazing, I did get a little carried away, and I had actually forgotten the whole reason we did this. The inside and the farm is still a mess. So now, for the rest of the day, I'm going to be working on billowing out all the water, like the captain I am, and replacing all the dirt that was eroded away from the rainwater. The good news is, after getting all the farmland fixed and the water replaced where it belongs, I realize that I haven't lost any seeds, and I can quickly start to replant everything. I know that this build is probably just perfect the way it is, but honestly, I just can't stop myself. I had so much fun building it that I just keep coming back and adding little details for the next few days. After all, cozy little builds like this is what Minecraft is all about. This has truly turned into the gem that I was hoping for. It's shining and almost looks out of place in the world around it, which is actually a problem. As much as I love this garden, I should probably start working on my cave, as I have some really big plans for this after all. Starting with this brand new Create block that I've just discovered for the first time. It's a dark, dark purple block that has a brilliant gold border surrounding it. Honestly, I want to make the entire build based around this color scheme alone. That's how much I've instantly fallen in love with this block. Of course, the best looking blocks are always the toughest to get, and this one's no exception. Not only does it need brass, which means we have to go to the nether, but it also needs crushed obsidian, which means we're going to have to create quite a few more advanced machines to get this block as well. However, I did find one little exploit here. I think I can make brass without getting a blaze rod or going to the nether. This might be a little bit cheating here, I'm not exactly sure, but I've never done it before, so let's try it out. For the sake of science, right? Yeah, it's not because I'm trying to cheat. No, of course not. Luckily, the kiln takes bricks and sand, which, thanks to erosion, we have a ton of that. Soon, I start to make a few blocks, and now I can use my steel scaffolding to start to wrap around to the back of the base. Then I start to make a staircase to the top of the coal ovens. And this is because I want to place the kiln up here. Now I get pretty far into making one, and then I realize I have no idea what I'm doing. I guess I just assumed it would be just like the coal oven. I don't know. So I guess I'm gonna have to take a second here and learn all about this. And to do that, first, I get a cutting board from Farmer's Delight. Hold on, I know, that doesn't make any sense. Where's Captain going with this? But trust me, you'll see. I use the cutting board to take the bark off of some logs, which I can make into paper. Combine that with the leather that we got fished out of the lake with the entangler and make our first book. Combine the book with a lever and we can make an engineer's manual. And soon, the engineer's manual thoroughly embarrasses me, because it tells me that the kiln is not a 3x3 like the cocoa oven, but instead it's just a 2x2. In fact, I go ahead and make a second one too. So, inside of them, I add a little bit of copper and a little bit of zinc. Then I add some of the coke coal that we've been making in the coke coal ovens, and this should create a good amount of brass in no time. Now, I just need to smash this brass under the mechanical press. But clearly, I'm far too sophisticated to be doing this by hand anymore. No. By that night, I set up the mechanical press much closer to all the other machines, so that now it's plugged in to the windmill. Soon, the press is bonking away just like it should. There is no sweeter sound. Now, we can craft the brass into brass casings, which, by the way, is an amazing looking block by itself. To be honest, I'm kind of tempted to stop right here and plan my entire color scheme around this. But once I get another look at that railroad casing, I definitely think it's going to be worth a little extra work. And speaking of work, we still have a lot to do. It starts by making some electrodes, which need quartz. Yeah, looks like we'll be heading to the Nether after all. No escaping it. You guys already know this, but I hate the sound the portal makes. So, like I always do, I'm gonna try to bury this really far underground. So, soon, it's set down, lit, and we're inside. We spawn in a warped forest, which is a little bit sad, because I was hoping to get some soul sand for my lanterns. But it's not all bad, because soon I find some cobalt ore from Tinker's Construct. I don't know what this is, but I might as well grab it, right? Finally, we grab some of the quartz that we came here for. Back up on the surface, we get a look at our beautiful build, but I can't marvel at it for too long. We need to get back to work. We add the redstone to the quartz to get rose quartz. Now, we use some sandpaper to sand it down. By the way, it still bugs me so much that doing this sounds like the eating sound effect. But at least I do get the electron tubes after that, so I guess it's worth it. Finally, we managed to make 9 mechanical crafters. So, after making some quick small cogs, we eventually get 24, which should be more than enough. Now, we just have to figure out how to place them and get them powered. I head over to the windmill, which unfortunately is quickly overstressed. This makes sense. The mechanical crafters are pretty power intensive. I set the crafters in an area where they'll be moving much slower and using much less power. And to my surprise, this actually works. I don't even have to add any more sails. The downside is that it will be going very, very slow. At the start of the next day, we add all the ingredients to make our giant crushing wheel. The good news is, recently in the past few days, we've been making a ton of progress. The bad news is, the trade-off is that I've been staying up way too late. I'm super exhausted and I can barely walk. But I do manage to drag myself over here with the wrench and set all of these arrows up in the correct direction. Now all the ingredients are slowly starting to move together. And yes, I really do mean so slowly. Eventually, we do get our crushing wheel. Crushing wheels are an amazing way to get far more yield out of your resources. In fact, it's even more than doubling your ores. But for me, I'm going to be keeping this very simple. I won't be doubling my ores, and this setup will be as basic as it can be. Sadly, it's right here that I add one of the wheels, and then I realize we might need those sails after all, as once again we quickly become overstressed. And speaking of overstressed, I'm now at tiredness 6. I am pretty overstressed too, so I have to go to bed. And so, it's now officially day 50. We're now halfway through our playthrough, but we've barely even begun our builds. Sadly though, this also means we're only halfway through our disasters. I see that our nether portal has already flooded for some reason and broken. I walk outside to see that the lake immediately filled up once again. The water levels are quickly rising. And what's even more concerning is where the water is coming from. I look at all the mountains to see that the glaciers have retreated far up the sides of the cliffs. Half of the ice and snow on these mountains has melted away, and the world is quickly starting to become an ocean world. While I was sleeping last night, water has rushed down the side of the hill and once again wiped out all of my crops and flooded the inside of my base. I swear, every time I think this farm is safe, I am unpleasantly surprised. Some of the dirt that I've planted up on the hillside has also been washed away as well. The good news is I'm catching on pretty quickly here, and I managed to get enough scoria in place to slow down the eroding as much as possible. I quickly replaced this with even more dirt. By the start of the next day, most of the damage has been repaired, sort of. Now I can start to repair the gardens. It's a good thing I love farming so much. This farm has been rebuilt 6 or 7 times already. I'd really like this farm to stop being wiped out every other day. I look up to see where the water is coming from, but most of the snow has already melted away. I do see that the giant mountain across the valley is still where most of the water is falling down, which is a good thing, I guess. Still, as I continue to build my base, I'm definitely going to have to make sure that I plan for all the flooding coming down from above me somehow. For now, the farm is, once again, looking pretty good, which does make me feel a little bit better. Now we can finally get some string. I also decide to make these chains, which let the lanterns hang down a little bit lower, lighting up our crops even better. And by the next day, the farm is once again looking perfect. Now let's get back to making those sails. With the farm now repaired, we now have the hemp and the string. Now it's time to get this giant windmill powered up. I had a few more rows of sails up at the top, as well as create a ton of phytogrow to boost the hemp even more today. I want to make sure we have enough power to run the pump, mechanical crafters, and this giant crushing wheel all at the same time if we need to. Now I know this might be a little bit greedy, but I really don't feel that bad because we're using clean wind energy, and from this day forward, we won't be adding any more pollution. I hope. For real this time. Now I'm going to try a new way to collect some dirt, sand, clay, and gravel that won't be destroying and harvesting the world around me. We craft up some strainers, and if we place them in water, we will be able to slowly, automatically collect some basic resources to help us out. I set down about 10 of them in the shallows of our pond, using a little bit of iron to make sure we have plenty of nets. To be honest with you, this is not some kind of game-breaking machine, but it's still something pretty useful that will be helping us working in the background while I continue to focus on other things. It's pretty helpful, even if it doesn't seem like it at first. Finally, by day 53, I set up the last of the sails and I reconnect all the cogs. Bingo. Now the pump, crafters, and yes, those beautiful crushing wheels are all working now. Sadly though, I see that they are going in the wrong direction, but fixing them is no problem at all. And in no time at all, we're ready to crush up anything that we could need. Now we can throw in some obsidian and get our very first crushed obsidian. I also decide to add a little extra walkway that will completely wrap all the way around the garden. I then add some stairs to get closer to the crushing wheels, but I have to be careful here. If you fall into these crushing wheels, it will definitely kill you. I head back to the base using my new walkway, and soon I can combine our brand new crushed obsidian with some lava. We've almost got these brand new blocks, and I'm so excited about it that I didn't pay attention. We're already at tiredness 7. This is kind of dangerous here. In fact, I see that I now have bloodshot eyes with red streaks going across my screen here. Ugh. I don't know why, but this really bugged me. Like, it was hard to look at. I was itching my eyes in real life here. So of course, I had to stop everything I was doing and immediately jump into bed. I think I've now been up for almost 4 or 5 days straight, all the way since day 50. So now, on day 54, we can finally make our railroad casing, a beautiful black block with crisp gold finish that should look pretty good. Really quickly, we'll lay it out here on the floor just to get an idea of how it looks. I set the blocks out, and immediately, I love them. This is the perfect block to craft our build around. But first, I make some treated wood slabs, which is also a pretty good looking block, and I start to add them on the far side of the base. Now I know I'm just sort of plugging these in to the side of a wall. It may seem random here, but trust me, this will all make sense. For now though, I am going to head out to do a little bit of mining. I need to get as many resources as I can to start this build. I come back after a full day mining, and I fill the thermal series ore doubling system with all of our ores so we can start to process. I add some black dye to our scoria to get dark scoria, which should match perfectly with the dark inside of the railroad casing. I start to use some steel scaffolding because I want our build to still look like a modern space age build with some modern steel blocks incorporated into it. I build those up, and then I head over to the far side of the build where I put those treated blocks. I turn the railroad casing into slabs. Unlike most builds, I'm actually going to be starting from the top down. I add these slabs of railroad casing onto our roof. Since the dark scoria matches so perfectly with the dark inside of the casing, I decide I want to make a bright golden brassy look to match the outer lighting of the casing as well. Some brass sheet metal will fit perfectly. It's a bit expensive, so I'm actually only going to cap off certain parts of the base, not use too much of this block. And soon, I start to make an offsetting build. Instead of making a 45-degree slope, I just barely set the blocks staggered, making the slope match the garden as well. Using different blocks, however, does make this process a little difficult, but I do figure it out. It's starting to look really, really clean. But this is just a small sample. I was liking what I was seeing for sure, but I still had no idea just how this was going to look if I tried to scale it up. I set up a little more steel scaffolding. This will work as supports to hold up the giant roof, and I even connect them to my garden. And yes, I'm intentionally extending the roof and stick out from the cliffside because I want it to cover part of the garden and keep it safe from any more raining or flooding that comes down from the mountainside. And if I'm being totally honest with you guys, I know that I was really holding back when it came to my builds in the last video, and I was focusing mostly on just space exploration. And while that was fun, for this video, I want to do a similar concept where I make a massive shield dome, but this time I want to put far more detail into it to make it look like a proper giant hangar. This time, I really am going to try to make it look decent. I gotta say, it's already starting to look much more like what I originally had in mind. Soon, all the scaffolding is in place, and the garden is completely covered. Now I just need to run a little more coverage to make sure that all the machines are safe as well. This means we're gonna need more brass. Luckily, the kilns have been working overtime and have plenty of it for us. So, let's go bonk this. I get brass thrown into the stone cutter and get a quick look up at the roofs, and I gotta say, this is awesome. I'm already really starting to like how this is looking. We should at least try to finish it up, see the final product before we make up our minds. I continue to add more brass, capping off the very peaks of the roof, and by that night, I decide to use a little more treated wood to fill in some detail in the background. It's nighttime, and although I can't see this too well, I can already tell you this is coming together perfectly. Finally, I decide to add some of that brass casing, since like I said, it's a great looking block all on its own. At first, I was honestly considering using this brass casing to cover the entire walls all inside of my base. And while I think that could still look pretty good, I actually am going to try something a little bit different first. Instead, the brass casing will be a trimming, almost like a border around the walls. Instead, the walls will be made out of mostly scoria bricks. The rich-looking scoria bricks, combined with the treated wood and brass brown, come together, in addition to the steel scaffolding towering above it, to give this a great industrial factory look, in my opinion. Finally, I start to work on that far side of the base, in case you were wondering what I was doing with all this. I'm making this an auxiliary entrance into my base. This pathway will lead us directly to our Create machines, and now this small little side entrance here will get us right up into our base very quickly. But just because it's a small little side entrance designed for function, doesn't mean I'm not going to be putting a lot of effort into making it look good too. Soon the first wall of the base is done, and I have to say, this is already looking pretty good. But this is only the beginning. I do decide to set the bricks a little bit further back, giving the entire wall of the cave a little bit more depth. By that night, I am getting a better little sneak peek here, and I'm thinking this could work. Now I'm starting to carve the stone out of the inside of the walls where the walkway will go. I even decide to put some small windows in the side of the brick. However, it's day 57. I'm getting pretty tired, so first, let's go to bed. At the start of day 58, I'm crafting up even more treated planks, since I really do love this wood. Now on the outside of the base, with the walkways and the paths, all of this will still be spruce. However, I've decided that once you cross the threshold inside the base, the floors will officially turn into treated wood. No hate on spruce slabs, of course, but I like the idea that once you enter the base, you get an upgrade in this beautiful slab, making the floor a little more detailed too. Then I start to build up the slabs that are heading up in a slight staircase that perfectly lead right into the main area of our base. I see that there's this big open area off to the side, and I don't really know what I'm going to do with this, but I'll deal with that later. For now, this little side entrance is already looking pretty good. And remember, this is just a mini corridor. I continue to build with these slabs, and now I start to make a roof over the walkway. But honestly, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with this either. For now, I think I'm just going to end up leaving it kind of like this. This does kind of look strange, almost like I have a little staircase that goes to nowhere, but eventually I'll figure this out. For now, it does lead us up to here and gives me a good little spot where I can look out my window, and I can see the entire view outside of my base. Speaking of the view, now that our cave is looking better, I decide it's time to switch focuses. My machines and strainers have been making tons of dirt, gravel, and sand. Now it's time to use some of it. So for the next few days, I'm gonna head out to my levee and out to the pond, and I'm gonna start to add a ton more sand and dirt. I also decide to turn on the pumps to drain out some of the water that fell in here on day 50, but not all of it. By the next day, I start to hoe up all the dirt, and soon the landscape has truly transformed. Now, we have filled out the banks of this tiny little creek that connects the two ponds inside of my little compound here. Let's leave all this though, let the grass do its work. For now, we can get back to focusing on the floor of my base. As I carve out some of the stone to make this process much less painful, I craft up a tank that I fill up with the creosote oil. Now I can make treated wood in bulk, and quickly can finish the entire interior floor of my base. Or at least most of it. I actually decided to leave this little area in the back here with some grass. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but for now, let's just leave it alone. Unfortunately, without a finished roof, I can't add too many lanterns, and I really wish I could. I need a little more light in here to try to keep the Enderman and the Blitz at bay. At the start of the next day, we do get the kilns working on even more brass. Then I walk past these gross stone walls that I've not done anything with, and I almost throw up. We're definitely going to have to take some time and fix these soon. But for now, I don't want to lose focus. I want to try to get the front of the base finished first. This requires aligning the back of the steel scaffolding with brass casing, then adding a little more brick all around the machines. To be honest with you though, I think I'm going to actually leave this mostly open. No need to cramp up these machines. Some more steel scaffolding all the way up to the roof, because at this point, I am addicted. And now we continue to work on the roof as we start to slowly slope downwards and cover up all the machines on this side of the base. And yes, you guessed it, even more scaffolding right at the very edge. Now, as the sun is rising on the next day, I'm feeling like this side is pretty good. I've decided that the industrial side of my base is going to be far more simplistic. For now, I'm going to go back to my main base, where I could add scoria brick all on the walls. But I want to do something a little bit better here. So I start to cook up some seared stone from Tinker's Construct. To make these, you need to cook up some grout in a furnace. And the good news is, this is just made out of clay, sand, and gravel, which are blocks that we have in excess. Throw those in our furnace, and pretty soon, we're getting our first seared bricks, which we can craft into these ladder patterns. I then combine these with some scoria pillars on each corner of my base to make these really bold, large pillars. Now, I'm not sure I want to do this on every single corner in my base, but dividing the industrial sector from my bedroom, I definitely do think that this is fitting. Of course, throughout the base, I do start to add these same pillars, but I'm not sure I'll add these same scoria lanterns everywhere just yet. So for now, I only get a small sample on this one little wall here, but already I'm thinking I know exactly what I want to do. Unfortunately, these scorched bricks do take a pretty long time to cook up, so I only get a small sample here on this wall. But already, I'm thinking this is exactly what I want. As the sun shines directly into my cave at the start of the next day, the front entrance is looking pretty good. I do decide to take a break on day 62 and collect a bunch of dirt throughout the entire day. That night, I continued to spread said dirt all over my base. I don't know if this is really fun to watch, like I don't know if this part of the video is cool, but I have to say, rebuilding a landscape is so much fun and it feels really rewarding once you're done. Because when the sun rises at the start of the next day, I get to see my progress as I'm slowly transforming the face of this world. The strainers are definitely helping out a lot with this too, as the clay, sand, and gravel is helping us make a ton of grout. I'm hoping that soon, without too much time cooking, we should have enough bricks to finish up the inside of the base. At the same time though, I will admit this is a pretty lofty goal. What I'm thinking about doing is I want to try to cover as much gravel in this worn down valley with dirt, grass, and life. And now that I have all of my machines working and helping me, I'm actually making some pretty good progress in doing this. Although Enderman here stealing my precious grass blocks is definitely not helping that process. Sorry bud, you gotta go. I continue to add even more sand all around the ponds, making more and more beach. And in the very center here, I even add this small little sand dune. We're about 2/3 of the way done with this 100 days, and the amount of progress I've made recently is really starting to show now. This once dead world is really starting to come to life, and is truly unrecognizable from the start. I head out to do an even bigger mining run, and I'm mostly focusing on getting even more scoria. I do grab some diamonds while I'm here, it's pretty nice I guess. And then I get betrayed by the realistic water physics, which make the lava flow down into my feet. Back at base, after a lot of mining and burning, I'm pretty tired, so I head to bed. But sadly, right as I start to fall asleep, my alarm clock wakes me up, and I can't get rid of all of my tiredness. Yeah, this is honestly a little too relatable. Now, I craft up another mechanisms tank, but I upgrade it to an advanced tank. And with some of those diamonds that we found, I even upgrade this tank to an elite tank. This tank can hold up to 136 buckets of lava, and it should really help me move around a lot of this lava lake, so I can continue to mine up all of the scoria that I accidentally covered in a lava flow. And even though this plan is pretty smart, trying to help me get rid of all the lava here, I still managed to be pretty stupid and light myself on fire again. I was smart enough to get to bed in time, and finally we get rid of this super bad tiredness by the next day. Now, we have a lot of seared bricks, and we should be able to start to make a good amount of progress on the walls inside of our base. I am still trying to line the pillars with even more of these ladders, because I really do like this look. And soon, I do manage to make this seared grand stone entrance that heads even deeper back into the cave. It's now day 66, but I think we can finally make some real headway on this base. By the way, I don't really know how to explain this, but there's something that I just really like when you have a pillar that goes from the bottom of your base and continues all the way through up to the top. Like, I really like how the staircase wraps around this central pillar here. I just think it's cool. I don't know, maybe that's just a me thing, but there's something about this that I just really, really like. What I think we can all agree on is it's definitely pretty cool to see the entire inside of the cave finally finished with all these seared bricks. Now, it's on to the roof. Speaking of roof, the top of my base is still filled with carbon, so very quickly I have to build out this small vent and let some of it out into the sky. I then decide, because I love this treated wood so much, this will also be the perfect material for our roof. And more importantly, now that we actually have a roof, we can start to add even more lanterns. With a little bit of light shining inside of here, which gets rid of all the mobs, helps me get to bed of course, but also, when some light has been shined on the inside of this base, I really get to see just how good it's looking. Although, I still do have a few more details that I need to fix up here. Get a couple more blocks on the walls, get the last little bits of roof in place. I can't get too excited. I also finally do decide that this little area here in the back of the cave is perfect to grow some grass. It'll act as a small indoor garden, and I start to add a little more dirt back here too. I get all of the lighting in the right places, and I move all the chests from the center of the base off to the side where they should be. The sun rises at the start of the next day to show us that this is all coming together perfectly. Another little detail that I make is a steel door, and I add this to the back covering the cave, completing the exit of my base. And as I take a quick moment here to look everything over, I have to say, it truly is all coming together here. There are a ton of modern machines from the space age, but also a lot of stonework and archways to make this look like an old school dwarven dwelling. It's the perfect mix, and it gives an ancient alien tech kind of vibe. I think I really like it. But we're definitely not done yet. I still have to figure out what I'm going to do with this weird open area. And of course, I still have to work on those walls of my auxiliary entrance. Now, after filling in some walls of this area and getting a little bit of lighting set up, I actually see that this area is pretty small. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do too much with it. At first, I'm thinking this might be an okay area for some storage. But to be honest with you, in my builds, I really like to have quick access to my storage, so putting it down the staircase might be a little bit of a pain. And so, while I'm thinking about it, I continue to make even more seared bricks, and by that night, I get an idea. I think I know the perfect use for this tiny little room. I grab my bed and I move it from this central chamber, and I tuck it down here where it's just a little more cozy. Remember, this is not supposed to be some gigantic, luxurious mansion. It's supposed to be an industrial factory that's supposed to feel like it's more focused on function. Therefore, having this tiny little bedroom that looks more like a cozy bunk that you might find in some barracks makes a little more sense to me. But remember, this is still a bedroom. It's still my bedroom. So I'm gonna leave it blank for right now. But I'll definitely come back here and give it a little more love. I'll give it just the right amount of coziness to make it home. For now though, I'm finally getting some seared bricks on the walls of the auxiliary entrance, as well as finishing off the roof of the industrial part of the base. The entire shield covering the whole thing is the perfect protection from any more runoff water. I won't be panicking if it starts to rain or if any more ice starts to melt. And yes, this does continue on the final side. I know it's looking pretty simple. It's not too beautiful. It's for function, and it keeps the water off the machines. Like I said, this is by design, as the industrial side should look far more functional. The finer details should be left for the living quarters and the base on the other side. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just making excuses to be lazy on this side. Who knows? What I do know is that it feels so good to finally have some real walls on the auxiliary entrance of my base. Now, whenever I walk in here after a day of working on the garden or my Create machines, I won't have to look at that ugly stone anymore. The entire base is looking pretty good now. The basics have all been done, and it's time to focus on the finer details, starting by growing a little grass in this quarter over here. I definitely think that this looks nice, but remember, it's also going to be functional, as this will absorb any carbon that comes out of my furnaces in the center of the base. I also now start to get some more seared bricks, and I add them onto the industrial wall on the side of the base. Then, on day 70, I smash up even more brass. And as the Great Bonk machine does its job, I get a second to turn around and take a good look at my entire base. We have 30 days left, but I've already got a ton of progress here, and it already looks amazing. I continue to add even more brass and make some good borders throughout, and I have to say, I like that this base isn't just simply one level with another level stacked on top of it. The fact that each room is skewered off from one another and they're only a few blocks below each other adds something really unique to the entire layout. I'll admit, this does make matching up each room a little bit more difficult. However, when everything does come together just perfectly, I think it's worth it. If everything fits just right, it's even more rewarding. These walls right here, they look great, but I'm thinking I can give them even more of a foundry or like a smelter style look if I make some very small tweaks. Now I smash up some copper to make these shiny copper blocks. I set them even further behind everything in the walls. Now, in all of the little gaps, it looks like I have molten alloys pouring down the side of my walls. I gotta say, I really love this look when it's done. And I even decide to add it to the other walls as well. Tragically, I do run out of copper on day 71, so I run out to go smash some more. Now this is a little bit expensive and time consuming for such a small little detail, but the small details are what make builds so gorgeous. And speaking of small details, I had some torches tucked away in the walls as well, which adds to the look of the alloys, making them look bright, hot, and shining. It makes all these details really pop. Also, adding some lanterns hidden below the boxes brings a little bit more light and really makes these walls seem way more dynamic. I can't really explain it. Maybe I can't put it into words, but it just feels so much better having this depth in the walls. The base is now at a state where I'm pretty proud of it, and all of the essentials are done. They're looking pretty good too. I spend the rest of day 71 admiring what I've done, including all this landscape too. The nature around me is looking just as good, if not better, than the inside of my base, and I head back into my farm to admire this as well. That night, I continue to add more and more sand and eventually head to bed in a little bedroom that's fine, but I'm still thinking this could be better. In the sunlight of day 72, I get another good look at our hard work, and I have to say I'm feeling pretty proud. The grass has now spread everywhere, and it's even starting to climb up the mountainside. The world is now even stronger than when I first arrived, but that doesn't mean we're stopping here. And I do head out to do a little more mining, because I do have a few more plans that are going to need a few more resources. And in the process, I find this cave directly under my base, where I guess all the locals and the native wildlife has been hiding. As much as I love this healing planet, maybe it's best to give these guys some space down here. I swear I was trying not to look at them, but I think I've aggroed like 4 Endermen here, and immediately I have to run, because this could be insanely dangerous, even with my good armor. I do manage to fight a few of them off, but I still have to be very careful where I'm looking. I have to say that this is pretty funny. I don't know if I've ever seen this happen before. This is just like the vanilla Enderman. I don't know if I've ever seen them do this before. I managed to fight off the last few Endermen that I accidentally aggro, but I think I'm going to leave these poor guys in peace and continue my life up on the surface. By day 73, I am starting to get a little bit of tiredness, so I'm thinking it's time to head back up and drop off all of my ores for processing. Now, at the start of day 74, I finally get all of the seared bricks on the wall behind my machines. And of course, I do run a pillar right up the corner. Like I said, this side will not have as much detail. Now the side with the auxiliary entrance here should definitely be looking much better than it is. I should probably start putting some work over here. For now, I finish up a few details on the roof, and finally, I'm looking to fix up my bedroom. I'm adding a border of brass, which I then match up with the outside border as well. Running this entire border all the way throughout the base really ties the whole place together. But I'm definitely not done there. Now, I start to dig out some of the walls all around my bed. I'm starting to add some depth, like cubby holes next to my bed, sort of like built-in nightstands. I also do decide to add this little copper casing, kind of like a small window. And yes, I know that it completely clashes with the color scheme. It definitely doesn't look as good as it could, but I love this copper block, and I haven't been able to find any way to fit it into my build yet, so I'm going to go with it, guys. If you guys like me up in the comments and you hate me for this, I totally understand. You're probably right, but I just couldn't help myself. Next, a couple spruce doors really helped pull the whole look together, and it's looking a bit better. Now I craft up some steel blocks, which I cut up into metal slabs. And yes, that's right, your eyes do not deceive you. We are using vertical slabs. I then set these up as a shiny sheet metal garage door over the entrance, but I do leave it halfway open. I then decide to also make a little mini door over the auxiliary entrance, because I don't want it to feel left out. Then it's back to mining up more obsidian and throwing it into the crushing wheel, because I am not done yet with making these amazing railway casings. I fit these into the gaps so the garage door is totally flush. And at the end of day 75, I add more lanterns to my bedside. Then I head to bed. I then see, at the start of the next day, that we can also make a vase with the blue wisteria growing inside of it. Of course, I immediately add this to my bedroom, and I see that I can make some casing into posts and add the vases on top of these. But let's be honest here, once I see these black and gold pillars, you already know I'm going to replace every post with these things. They're just looking too good. And yes, I'm going to put a couple of them in my bedroom as well. Also, we put a block of silver and lapis too. I set them deeper into the walls to add a little bit of color and make things pop and shine. Now the bedroom is looking much, much better. This is really what I was thinking of the whole time. Finally, with the wither rose that I found at that mountaintop, I put that at the head of the bed with a few alien-grown poppy flowers to complete the look. The details of the entire house have come together perfectly, and I'm very satisfied with this build. However, we still have 25 days, so I'm not going to waste them. I start to look into some new blocks, such as slag, because I want to make one more beautiful ornamented room. Unfortunately, the rich slag is far more in line with the color scheme we have, with that dark brown look. And of course, it's much more expensive to get. Step 1 is that we're going to have to craft up some Ingvar. Inside the kiln, we use iron and nickel. Now we can make Ingvar gears. In the meantime, I do decide to make a little more obsidian, but this time we'll be putting it in our mechanisms machines. We then craft up the famous obsidian compressor, and if you're a loyal viewer, you already know where I'm headed with this. We mix in a little bit of diamond with our obsidian, then compress it with a little osmium. Now we're getting refined obsidian ingots. And now with this, we can make the strongest basic gear and tools, including this refined obsidian paxel, a multi-tool that digs stone, dirt, and wood. But for now, let's get back to using the Ingvar to make our induction smelter. With this and a little bit of sand, we should be able to make some slag deposits. This definitely might take a little while though, so we have plenty of time to craft up even more refined obsidian, and finally, we start to make some gear for us. This is even stronger than netherite. But more importantly than all of that, we can now start to add even more detail to the auxiliary walkway, meaning that this went from painfully ugly to pleasantly surprising. We do take another mining trip to get even more scoria, but with this paxel, it's pretty easy. I then start to carve up all the scoria in the stone cutter, and now I start to carve out a hole in this wall up here. We'll finally have a use for this tiny little staircase, as it will be the entrance into our next room. I knew I'd find a use for it eventually. Now, what I'm imagining for this next room is something I've never built, so I'm kind of winging it here for now. But I definitely think I want to add some scoria bricks to be the main block for this room. I make some staircases, and soon I start to set them up to make a giant circular opening that leads outside. And by that night, I accent the four corners of this giant circle with the railway casing. And by the start of the next day, I can start to add the glass, because this is going to be a giant window for this room. And it's looking good, but there's still a lot of work to do. Starting with the floors, and I decide this is a good chance to bring back the treated wood scaffolding. The garden showed off the bottom side of the scaffolding pretty well, but this room will show off the top of it. I love all of these little small planks with the nails at the end of them. It makes the floor look perfect, like a treated wood deck. Of course, I run another pillar in the corner here, but on the far side right here, I'm still not really sure what I want to do. For now, I'll leave it blank, and we'll finish that up later. I head back to check on my slag production to see that this thing is still going to take a really long time. It's been 3 days, and I think we've only made about 7 blocks. And now I'm starting to think we may not finish this by the time the 100 days end. I'm not going to let that slow me down. I'm going to push ahead and start adding these blocks regardless. I just want to get an idea of what this might look like. I want to set all the rich slag around the window to make it really pop and separate it from the rest of the scoria. I then add some shafts, which meet up in the center of the window with another railroad casing. Do not ask me why I did this, I guess I just thought it was cool. And while a lot of the stuff was starting to look pretty good, and as I get a lot of this set up and I start to look at it, I'm feeling pretty confident in some of this stuff. But to be honest with you guys, for the first time in this entire playthrough, I wasn't really confident in how all this was going to turn out. But still, I added these regular slag blocks at the back of the window and continue to press on. I then take some slag bricks, which I line on the walls on the inside of the room. I then also take some brass casing, which I wrap around the entire center. Now it's time to work on the facade on the outside of the room. I want to get a little bit ahead here because again, I'm not really sure how this is going to look. I'm not in love with this yet. And if I want to make any changes, I want to leave myself a little extra time in case this all doesn't work out. Now I'm starting to add some scoria bricks right up here to make an additional add-on of the roof on top of the fortress. Like I said, some of these bricks haven't exactly won me over yet, but I can't say that about the scoria bricks. They're always beautiful and they come out perfect. These, plus the sunlight shining through this giant window the next day are really lifting up my spirits, and I'm starting to think I might be able to pull this room together after all. Also, the bonk machine bonking loudly, it is a good omen. And these brass blocks wrap around the room and add a lot of brightness in here. I add another row of brass casing to finish off the top. Then I decided to stay a little bit more conservative here, as I just put some simple clay bricks on the roof. Now, for the next few days, I'm going to be chopping down a lot of my trees and cutting them up on the cutting board to make paper. Then, thanks to Tinker's construct, I can make these patterns out of wood, and I'll be able to use them with a little bit of slime from the locals, thank you, to make books without needing any leather. While this process is fantastic for a world with no sugarcane or cows, it's definitely more time consuming. And that's not great because we are running out of time. But eventually, we managed to chop down enough trees and get enough bark to make a decent amount of books. Now, we have our enchantment table and a full library. That's right, this beautiful, ornate room with its shining blocks, giant window, it's supposed to be a little unique and feel a little bit mystical, because this is the room where we're going to keep our enchantment library. This completes the flow of the entire build. On one side, we have a very functional, very smooth, and simple look where our industrial machines are kept. Then on this side of the base, we have the exact opposite, where we've put a more unique and interesting build which fits the enchantment library. Getting all of our gear and our Paxel all enchanted is pretty nice too. Although getting respiration on my helmet on a frozen planet might not be great. All the enchants I get on my chestplate definitely are. Honestly, this might be one of the best chestplates I've ever seen. Which is great. I might need it to protect me from all of these annoying little guys. Soon, we have all of our bricks laid out on the second floor. It doesn't look as strong and as industrial, but that's okay, because it doesn't have to shield us from all the elements like the front entrance does. The next day, I actually think I see ice in my lake, which is weird, because I don't remember seeing that before. Although I don't get too distracted by that. I'm a little too focused on the fact that this room, in the daylight, it's really looking perfect. I'm glad I saw this through, and even though it's not super symmetrical or traditionally like good looking, I think that its uniqueness has really come together to make something special. This strange window is the perfect accent piece for a room that looks fresh, unique, and different. That's all good news. The fact that this world is starting to fill up with ice might not be, but for now, once again, I'm not too focused on that. I'm hoping that that's not a bad sign that we're ignoring. In the meantime, I go to get even more scoria. The next day, I come down my walkway through my fresh new auxiliary entrance, up the stairs, past my cozy bedroom, into the grand chamber, and I gotta say once again, I am loving this build. There is one more little detail that I'd like to add as I head to the Nether. I was really hoping I could get some soul sand to make those blue enchanting lanterns and hang them all over the enchantment library. But sadly, I just can't find any soul sand. And at first, I was definitely feeling like this was tragic and bad luck. But soon, I realized it's a blessing in disguise. But you'll have to see that later. In the meantime, I grabbed some magma blocks as well as glowstone, because you never know when you'll need it. Now, on day 86, I finally cooked up my first cobalt. Now let's see what we can make out of it. And one of the interesting things I see we can make is seared lanterns. We can fill these up with a ton of different fluids, including cobalt. So great. I'm thinking I can make custom lanterns and hang these wherever I want, right? At least that's what I thought. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of work ahead of us before we can get there. In the meantime, this means we're going to have to make a lot more grout and even more seared bricks, because our work is far from done. For now, I do finish off this side of this room, and I just start to place some vanilla lanterns in the library. But even this, even just a little more light, really does add to the room. I'm loving it. We only have less than 14 days, and I still have one more project in mind. I just have no idea how big it would be. Either way, it starts off by using our seared bricks to make a faucet, a drain, a basin, and of course, quite a few more seared bricks. We're trying to put all this together to make our very first Tinker's Construct smeltery. But, like I said, I've never done this before, so I'm afraid it might come out a little clunky. I decide I'm going to place the smelter at the very top of this base, above the main chamber. That means we're going to continue with our spiral staircase theme as I go from the library back and continue upwards where I start to dig out this huge room. At first, I didn't really know how much time it would take to make this room, so I just started it out very simple and didn't want to get too ahead of myself, which for now means adding just scoria bricks. Now, that being said, I still didn't want to make it too boring, and I thought it was a good chance to put even more copper casing, since I do love this so much. Now, after giving it a little more thought, I do decide to go back to the brass casing, as I start to make a border all the way around the entire room. But I still really wanted to add this copper casing into the room, so I try to add it above the brass, but by day 87, I pretty quickly changed my mind, because I just don't think they look quite right. Instead, I continue to add even more brick as well as chiseled scoria, and I line them up so that they match the outside of the base as well. After trying over and over with a couple different layouts, I finally settle on just brass casing with scoria. The copper casing is going to have to wait. I make one last desperate attempt to really force this into the build, and I add copper casing as the molding all the way around the top rim of the build. On day 88, I can't spend too much time trying to figure out all this decoration on the walls, because I only have a few days left. I thought that the roof out of copper casing might look good, but once again, I'm pretty quickly realizing this is just too plain. I start to experiment with different ways to break up the pattern, and eventually I do decide to go with a checker pattern. Now we have copper casing checkered with brass sheets, which does really make both blocks pop out. I am still desperately trying to fit copper casing. I'm not sure it does end up perfectly here, but I think I'll let it slide. I just wanted to get this block in no matter what. Besides, if you think about it, this is supposed to be another industrial room. It's not supposed to look perfectly, right? Speaking of which, I have to keep focused and move on to making our smeltery. This starts by putting 9 blocks on the floor, then making a border around those with the seared bricks. In the end, it should sort of look like a giant bowl. Now, we add a drain and 2 more blocks, although this is wrong, don't copy this, I was still learning here. I then add the funnel above the basin, and on day 89, I have the fuel tank ready to start up smelting. Unfortunately, I was skipping a couple steps here in Tinker's construct, and I hadn't figured it all out yet. For now, I brought up the lava, which I was trying to use as fuel. I was wasting precious time here, but luckily, I figured out my problem pretty quickly, and I realized I actually have to make a smaller melter first. Soon, I had the melter on top of a fuel tank with a funnel leading into this basin. Now, by putting a seared heater in the basin, all I had to do was heat up some copper, then I had to pour it on top of the heater. Using just a little bit of lava and a bit of patience, soon the copper was dripping down onto the sear heater, and this is how you make the smelter controller. This was the last block I needed to finish up this small smeltery. I also did decide to add a small walkway here over the smeltery so I could look down inside of it, watch all the alloys cook up. I also realized that I had to attach the fuel tank into the border of the smelter itself instead of underneath it. But soon, I had everything figured out. We just add a little bit of lava, and in no time at all, we start cooking up some new alloys. The question is, what will they be? For now, I'm keeping it very simple, and I'm just melting up the cobalt that we found. Sure enough, everything works out perfectly. Soon we have a ton of cobalt melted up in this giant smelter. Now we take a little bit of time to cook up some more seared bricks. We use these to make about 16 seared lanterns. Now that I have these, I run back up to the smelter, and I should be able to fill these with liquid cobalt. Now I set it down right here so I can get a good look at it. It's a little bit dim, it doesn't really actually work as a lantern, but I have to say, this rich, dark blue is pretty amazing. With this, I can now make custom lanterns of any color I want. So, I add my very first lantern to the library. I simply put some chains up so that it will hang a little bit lower and we'll have a better view of it. Then, I pour the rest of the cobalt out. I wanted to use other metals to make other colored lanterns, and sadly, I didn't realize that I needed 9 ingots in order to make an entire block. which means we did waste a bunch of cobalt here. A clumsy and definitely avoidable mistake, but honestly, I was way too excited about making different types of alloys to be too worried about this. Before I get too carried away with mixing up all these metals, which I definitely could do for the rest of 100 days, don't get me wrong, I have to focus on something more important first. And of course, that is the environment around us. When I look up into the sky, it's very clear to me that the clouds of pollution are all floating towards the mountainside, where they're now collecting up and they're starting to melt all the snow. This is why this particular area of the mountain had so much melting and was flooding so much. There's still a lot of pollution up here, but the water has stopped for now, as the world seems to be healing. Now, we'll just wait for the grass to grow as we turn to day 91. I start to experiment with melting down nuggets as I melt down some gold. I know that the lantern can be filled with about 100 millibuckets of fluid, so I try to melt down enough nuggets to get pretty close to that number. Now, I have to say, this golden lantern hanging in the middle of our window, it's looking pretty good. Next up, I throw a magma block into the smelter to see what this will turn into. The good news is, I really like this dark crimson and black look. The bad news is the smelter is now full of this stuff, so I'm going to be getting a ton of lanterns, whether I like it or not. Now, because these aren't too bright, I'm going to have to hang them in combination with normal lanterns to have decoration and lights in the smeltery room. But soon, we do have this smeltery filled with these awesome, amazing dark lanterns. But now I'm starting to think that there must be something that brightens the room at the same time, and so I start to look into aluminum glass. I really want to make some of this new, amazing glass. But sadly, it's really expensive. First thing is it needs blaze powder. Luckily, I already know that Thermal Series can make us blaze powder much easier than going to the Nether and hunting down a fortress. We just need 2 machines. The first one is the multi-servo press, which requires a little bit of Constantine. And Constantine is made by combining copper and nickel in our kiln. In no time at all, we get our magma blocks being pressed in the multi-servo. Or at least that's what I thought. Apparently, we still have to make an unpacking die, which will require more Ingvar and more Constantine. It's a good thing we have this kiln, or else this process would be a little bit painful. Luckily though, without too much worry, we managed to get all the components to make the packing die. Pretty easily, and pretty soon, we're crushing these magma cubes into magma cream. And this is where the second machine comes in. Now we make a centrifugal separator. By putting the magma cream in this, it will separate out the slime and blaze powder. In addition, we also need gunpowder. On a planet with no creepers, that means we're going to have to craft some up. We just need coal, niter, and sulfur, and luckily we have a little bit of each. With this, we can make our first fire charge. Now, we just have to make hardened glass. And to do this, we'll need obsidian. Now, I could farm this, but I'd rather make a machine to automate the process for me. Luckily, we do have this Blitz, who offers to volunteer to help us by sacrificing his body to science. We can farm the snow that he creates, as long as we're careful not to take too much damage from him. And with a bucket of water, we can turn snow into ice. And of course, we can then use this ice to make packed ice, which is good, but sadly to make our next machine, we'll need blue ice, so we have a lot more work to do. I don't really have too much time to keep on milking Blitz and messing around with this. So I'm going to try a new strategy, a little bit of a Hail Mary approach here. I take one of my old diamond picks, and I want to see if we can get Silk Touch. Sure enough, we get really lucky here. It's the first enchant we get. Now I can head out to the lake, and I can find the ice that's been forming out in the valley and start to dig it up. I also get to see what Vein Miner does, as now almost the entire lake's worth of ice is collected in just one swing. Pretty cool, although I gotta be honest with you guys, that kind of scared me there for a second. The good news is, with all this ice, we can very easily make 2 blocks of packed ice. With some tin, silver, and glowstone, we can quickly make aluminium dust. And now for the bad news. The Blast Chiller, the machine I've been trying to make, which takes blue ice, actually only takes packed ice, so I was wasting a lot of time there. Although honestly, I've had way dumber missteps in the past, so it's not too bad. We set up this machine along with our tank full of lava, and now we can quickly configure this so that it will start to automatically make obsidian. This will make the process of getting hardened glass much easier. Now we have everything we need to make aluminium glass. But sadly, we only get 2 blocks. This stuff is so expensive. But hey, at least we can get a chance to experiment with it. I set some of it out up here to see how it looks. And I gotta say, already, it's amazing. Sadly though, it isn't amazing to try to remove it. Once you put it down, it's basically got the same hardness as obsidian. But soon we fix this little mistake, and we craft up way more aluminium glass, because I'm quickly falling in love with this stuff too. I then make 3 windows out of this glass at the very top of our base, which not only breaks up the facade, making it look a little bit more unique, but also it lights it up. By adding another light-giving element, we continue the theme of gold and darkness mixed together. And of course, in addition to all this, it now helps to light the room where the smelter is as well. I think it looks so amazing, I get a little carried away. I start to crank out even more of this super expensive glass. I head to my enchantment room, to my giant circular window, and I break it, because the plan is to replace all this glass with the gorgeous new aluminium glass. But before I decide to do that, since it's so difficult to mine it up, I decide I'm going to make another upgrade as well. But just before I get carried away with that, and get a little too greedy, only focusing on aesthetic, I need to make sure I have all the functional parts of my base working first. After all, this smelter will produce a ton of carbon and sulfur, so now I'm going to add an industrial chimney to pull all the pollution out of this room before we get ourselves an explosion. Or at least that's what was in the plan. Using the mine veiner on my ceiling, I accidentally ripped the whole thing apart. The good news is I can still make progress here. I start adding the nether bricks and continue making my industrial chimney. The bad news, obviously, is that the entire roof has been ripped open. The chimney is starting to look pretty good. But remember, I have to make it big enough so that whole entire blocks of carbon or sulfur will be able to move out quickly. This does require a little extra time and a lot of bricks. The good news is pretty quickly, the chimney passageway is coming together. The bad news is, it just wasn't enough bricks. I have to head back down into the nether to start collecting as many as I can. I don't want to spend any more time trying to go down here to finish this chimney. Eventually, I have most of the brick in place and have a very crude, primitive looking chimney that's starting to come together. I'd like to make it look a little nicer, I really would, but it's already day 94, so for now on, I'm gonna have to stick with the fundamentals. Remember, with the roof of my smeltery completely collapsed, it broke a lot of lanterns, which might end up being a good thing. After spending a day in the nether collecting shroom lights, I have an idea. On the roof of the smeltery, I can still add my copper casing, but instead of that brass, I'm going to add a brand new block, the shroom lights. This makes this room intensely bright. Honestly, it's a little bit harsh on the eyes. But what it does mean is now I can add whatever lanterns I like, since I definitely won't be needing any more light up here. Also, to be honest, I think this super bright, hot look kind of matches the feel that you would get with an indoor smelter room. In addition, it kind of makes the chimney stick out in the negative space there. Finally, let's get back to the fun part. We can now experiment with the smelter one more time, as we add 3 bars of copper, then just 1 bar of gold, and soon this all perfectly mixes into 4 bars of rose gold, exactly what I want. For the first time ever, I've actually made my own brand new Tinker's Construct alloy that can only be made in a smeltery. So of course, I immediately start to crank things up to an industrial level. I add as much copper and as much gold as I can. Soon, we have enough rose gold to start to make an entire block of it. Now, I just have to hit the faucet and drain it into the basin. This time, I made sure I definitely had enough rose gold to make a full block. And now, I just get to sit here and watch it cool. Pretty quickly, it takes form. As it does, I must say, pretty quickly, I fall in love with this gorgeous block. It is exactly what I wanted. Elegant, vibrant, rose-tinted gold block. It should act as the perfect border of this window. Soon, once it's brightened with aluminum glass, the beauty of the gold is now highlighted even more. This is the most expensive window I've ever seen, but I think it might just be worth it. I don't have too much more time on this world, but every minute that I have, I'm going to be spending making even more of these blocks of rose gold. The smelter is pretty cheap to run. It works pretty quickly, and in the next few days, slowly, I start to replace every block of slag with this beautiful new rose gold block. Finally, the entire border is finished, and I can get started as I add all of the aluminium glass. Once it's all in place, even the harsh nights of this frozen, once dead planet cannot hide its illustrious shining beauty of this aluminum rose gold beacon. Now it's shining out on the top of my base, and it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever built. It's unique, a little bit different and unusual, somewhat industrial and hardcore on the outside, but on the inside, it's shining, clear, beautiful, and bright, kind of like me. In addition, the new room that we've added on to the smeltery looks great as well. The entire build has really come together perfectly. The base works as follows. The bottom levels on the far right are far more brutal and industrial and basic, and as you move through the base, upward and toward the left, things become more and more refined. Every room in the base has its own flavor and is slightly unique, but none of them break the overall theme, and they all fit together perfectly. I think I've spent enough time on myself and my base. The last project that I'll be worrying about in this playthrough is fixing the world around me. Now I create a spout using Create, and it lets me pour water from my old pump system right onto dirt, and it will start to make stacks and stacks of grass blocks. We only have a few days left, not really enough time for grass to spread on its own. And the rest of this playthrough will be dedicated towards laying out as much of the dirt and grass that we've collected. Now we'll have more and more open plains that will suck up all the pollution we've created. And hopefully we get this planet looking even better than before we crashed here and made that original cloud of smoke and pollution. This requires covering the whole mountainside with dirt and grass. But it's the least that I can do. Every time I come back here and start to place even more grass, I see that more and more pollution is being sucked up. I also see that the oceans have almost also completely healed, as the water level has now risen up to just about as high as it was before they evaporated. In fact, I'm actually using so much water to make dirt into grass, I have to borrow a little bit from the ocean to replenish my little lake. Now, I am getting tired, so I have to head to bed one more time. And then, as I'm sleeping, something magical happens. The next morning, I see that snow has begun to fall once again as the planet is no longer suffering from intense global warming. The nature of this planet has been restored as the lakes begin to freeze and the snow has begun to fall in huge clumps. But in addition, it's even better than that, because now the planet also has all of the new beauty from the trees and the grass and the life that has been added. And we've turned this once barren world into a pristine winter wonderland. I've also seen that the mountains and the glaciers are healing as well, as the snow is starting to head back down and build up where it used to be. Now it's day 98. I have about 1 day left, and I decide I'm going to fix up this chimney after all, as I begin to give it a bright brass finish. And that's about it. No hurry or panic or crisis here that I have to address. At the end of this 100 days, I spend my last few days in this world just relaxing and reflecting on everything that I've built. As I walk through my beautiful winter wonderland and spend a little bit of time in this gorgeous base, I realize that this might be one of the best builds I've ever made in Minecraft. Not only have I made a super unique base filled with a ton of beauty, but also, honestly, more importantly, I've made this world around me even better than when I got here. So often, when we play Minecraft, we destroy the world around us and drain it of all of its resources to make our builds look nice. I managed to do something special here because I've done both. Not only have I made my home look perfect and end up having everything I could possibly want, but the world around us has not been sucked dry. And in fact, it's been healed and looks better than ever before. The only thing better than this base is knowing that I didn't have to destroy this world to make it.